Hello and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jarrell Haynes. I'd like to welcome you all to this Wednesday, March 10th, special meeting of the Board of Directors for Spokane Public Schools. Just a few quick logistical items before we jump into our meeting agenda. Members of the public are allowed to attend our special meetings by utilizing audio and/or visual tools and Zoom, but we do not accept public comments during our special meetings. So members of the public that are in attendance, please make sure to double and triple check to make sure that your microphones remain muted throughout the duration of this meeting. With that being said, I now call this meeting to order, and we'll jump right in with item 3A, Downtown Stadium Proposal presented by Mark Richards, CEO of the Downtown Spokane Partnership. Just really quick, as school board members are aware from media reports and from recent formal requests that we received, the Downtown Spokane Partnership has requested to present a proposal for downtown stadium option. We have been moving forward to implement the plan to build a new stadium at Joe Albee, and it has been consistently stated that our plan is continuing on schedule and that any group in the community is welcome to share ideas about the concept of a downtown stadium if new details or information becomes available. Based on our understanding from the formal request and from media reports, it appears that there are indeed new details and that do in fact exist regarding a downtown stadium option. As such, we have scheduled tonight's agenda for the purpose of hearing the new proposal from the Downtown Spokane Partnership. School board members will be listening to the presentation this evening and asking follow-up questions of the DSP and/or district staff. Upon the conclusion of the presentation and the question and answering session, the school board will address when or if the community input and school board discussion may occur. So with that being said, take it away, Mark.
Thank you, Chairman Haynes, fellow board members, and Dr. Swinyard. Just want to thank you all for inviting us to be here tonight. As you mentioned, my name is Mark Richard, and I'm the CEO of the Downtown Spokane Partnership, which is a nonprofit advocacy organization. And our focus is on the health and the vitality of the core of our city. I'm here tonight with partners from the Spokane Sports Commission and the United Soccer League and the PFD, representing several local organizations who support the effort of the downtown stadium. Again, as I mentioned, we're really grateful for the opportunity to be here and excited to share this new proposal with you. So a lot's changed since the SPS board considered a downtown location for a new stadium, which the voters approved funding for back in 2018. At that time, you might recall, we had an idea for a downtown stadium, and it was a bold idea, but we didn't have many of the details worked out at that time. We knew locating a stadium in the downtown core would have several benefits for the school district and your families and your students. But at the time, we didn't have any formal agreement in place that would cement our plan. We had also heard some concerns, specifically around the challenges with parking and traffic. Based on that information, the SPS board, of course, at that time decided to select Joe Albee as the location to build the new stadium. And instead of tearing down the old facility, as the cost to rehabilitate Joe Albee was shown to be too high. But we come to you today with a proposal in hopes that the school board will reconsider this decision. As we know, the opportunities and the benefits of locating the stadium downtown are just too great. In fact, I would say in some ways they're endless. We've spent the last 2 years making improvements to this proposal, and we're super excited, as I mentioned, to share this with you this evening. Some highlights of the benefits of this proposal include a central location for a stadium that would be used by all 5 high schools in your district, significant access to public transit, free parking for the SPS events, land that is needed for the project and was needed back then is now all under contract, and a partnership with a professional sports team, as well as a study showing the economic impact from a downtown stadium would be 8 times greater than what it would be compared to the Joe Albee site, and so much more. So locating the new SPS stadium in downtown is the better choice for SPS, for its families and students and taxpayers, and for the community, we believe. We know this school board cares deeply about equity. Locating the new stadium in the downtown core will ensure equitable access for all students and their families. The downtown location has 7 bus routes within a half-mile radius and is less than a mile from the STA Plaza, which is the major transit connection hub for the system, with 29 different routes serving that hub. So in contrast, the Joe Albee location only has 1 bus stop within a half a mile of the facility that's being proposed, and the buses run on every 30-minute increments at best. So depending on the route, Albee is at least 10 miles from Ferris High School, while the downtown location is less than 3 miles from 3 of your high schools, 4 miles from Rogers, and would be 5 miles from Ferris. Downtown is a much more central and accessible location for all SPS families and students. Parking would no longer be a barrier. That's also changed. As you might recall, when this project was discussed in 2018, the SPS board estimated that it would cost the district and families an additional $10 million to construct a parking structure. This is one of, if not the major barrier and complaint at that time. We've solved that issue. We've secured agreements with partners to ensure free parking during all SPS events. And one of the parcels I mentioned that we have under contract would be a parking lot with an additional 400 to 500 car park stalls. In addition to that, just in that 2 short year period, we also have another development that's happening immediately adjacent to this proposed site that would also have a parking structure included. So a study that was done back in 2018, right as the voters were voting, found that with all 3 potential venues in the area, there was not a need for an additional parking garage at that time or parking structure. But we felt it was important. We knew it was so important to your constituents to add that we added this as a part of our proposal in response to them. And with the traffic study commissioned by the Spokane Public Schools at that time and conducted by an independent firm, we know that congestion isn't an issue either. In the unlikely, enviable event that we had a case where we had events happening in all 3 major facilities, that study showed that the current infrastructure could handle that. Might require some additional flagging, but the infrastructure of the streets could handle that additional traffic. So the new downtown stadium would not only meet all the SPS design needs, it would also come in at the same cost of building a new stadium at Albee. This is not an ask today for additional funds. This proposal simply shifts the bond funding dedicated for a new stadium from the Albee location to a downtown location. The SPS bond dollars investment would remain the same, and there would be no new money requested from the district or from taxpayers. So what's new, however, is this proposal with an additional study that we commissioned would generate, we believe would generate significant financial savings to Spokane Public Schools, roughly $350,000 a year, which equates to over $17 million over the lifetime of the stadium. This money could go back to the SPS budget for things like student programs and services, helping to deliver on your commitment to being the best stewards of your taxpayers' funds. The cost savings that would be achieved by having our public facilities district, the cost savings would be achieved by having our public facilities district run the maintenance and operation of the facility, which is their day job. That's what they do. That's what they're experts at. And it is also something that their board has agreed to do should the SPS board approve this proposal and to move forward. And for the same cost, this facility would have a multi-purpose use that would benefit families and students for a variety of both SPS events and events beyond the district. In fact, our analysis, our design and economic analysis, we estimate we could probably generate twice the amount of events simply because of the central location. So you're getting better utilization out of this facility for your taxpayers. So in selecting the downtown as a location for the new stadium, SPS not only brings direct additional benefit to its students and families, it also has an opportunity to be a community partner in economic development, creating real impact, real jobs for the community, including your families in the district. We know that you've seen the need in our community, particularly this year through free meal distribution and childcare needs. So in many ways, the school district has been the backbone of our local economy, and driving economic development with this project is yet another way the school district can show support for our community in our time of need. So for the same investment as the current plans at Albee, SPS will generate 8 times the economic impact of the stadium if it's built downtown. That's $11.4 million in annual economic impact. And those who would benefit most are those businesses that have been hit the hardest over the last year. Restaurants, small shops, small businesses, not only located downtown, but across the region would benefit positively and be positively impacted. Approximately 80% of the area's businesses are small businesses, and this economic impact would be significant to them. Many of these business owners and employees are also parents and students in your district, families who have had a challenging year, to say the least. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Eric Sawyer, who's the CEO of Spokane Sports, to talk more about the additional opportunities and the impact of sports on our community. Eric?
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, board members. It's great to have this opportunity once again to talk about the possibility of a downtown stadium. As many of you know, the Spokane Sports has been supportive of this concept for many years, and we feel even stronger about it today with some of the benefits that Mark has certainly outlined, and I want to talk about too here. I think the North Bank location still presents unbelievable synergies between what is soon going to be the podium coming online here in the fall, certainly with the arena. In our own activities, we have been identifying a number of events that we couldn't currently host without the kind of stadium that's being proposed. Everything from NCAA soccer to lacrosse, rugby, cheer, band. I think Mark talked about a number of those activities, something that it's important to us. As a nonprofit organization, our mission is economic development through sports. We're involved with 60 to 70 different events throughout the year. We work closely with the WIAA in high school athletics and making sure that they have the kind of experience that the student athletes deserve during state tournaments and regional tournaments. And we're a marketing partner for the Public Facilities District. So this stadium fits right in our sweet spot of what we're about as an organization in economic development. What I'd like to do is touch base on the concept of the opening of additional fields potentially at the Joe Albi site in partnership with the Dwight Merkle site. What this potentially does is it could double the number of multipurpose fields that are available, going from 8 to 16 fields. That would open up a significant opportunities for us as it relates to being a true tournament quality venue with 16 fields. The study has suggested that there could be as much as $3 to $6 million worth of additional economic impact by having these fields in that area. Assuming that we can do it with artificial turf, this brings us significant advantages actually to the Spokane schools. As many of your athletic directors and certainly coaches will tell you, in the spring when we have heavy rains or late snows, the natural turf fields in a lot of the high schools become almost unplayable. With the idea that we could have artificial turfs at the Albi site, this gives an opportunity to the schools to have a location to continue to practice and play their games. In addition, when you add additional venue to any kind of sport, it just encourages more school programming. I think the best example of that is what you see in the tennis, high school tennis. Because of the number of tennis courts that are available throughout the district, and I use Ferris as one of the best examples, they're able to offer more school programming, after school programming for the students. We're limited today with fields. So we have the possibility to expand rec programming, especially for the high school activities after school. And I think it's important to also think about the ability to have a tournament quality venue here and a practice facility that'll keep our families home. Right now, and it's especially true in soccer, you have to travel typically to the west side to be able to play in your tournaments. This gives us an opportunity to keep families here, which makes a lot of these sports much more affordable for families who want to have their children and they're participating in athletics. Also, I think it's important to take a snapshot of soccer and get an understanding of what soccer has become in this country. For many of us in my generation, we didn't play the sport of soccer. It wasn't even offered in high schools. Today, we've seen huge generations of kids who grew up playing the sport who are now becoming fans. And the Northwest especially has become almost a mecca for soccer. all you have to do is look at the Portland Timbers and the Sounders in Seattle and see their attendance and understand how popular soccer has become in the Pacific Northwest. So the idea that we could bring a USL team into the market plays right into the character of who we are as a community and who we are in the Northwest. And finally, before I introduce Justin, I'd like to just leave one final thought. I think if you took the time to poll all of the coaches and certainly the athletic directors throughout the school system, I think you'd find an overwhelming support that the downtown location is the best location for the student athletes, the fans, and their families. That's a baseline. I think from there, all the rest of the benefits that we're talking about in many ways is just icing on the cake. The best place for these kids to be participating and showing their skills and learning the life skills that are associated with athletics is going to be downtown. With that, I'd like to introduce Justin Papadakis, with the CEO with the United Soccer League, the USL. And before he comes on, I want to just say something about the USL from my experience. They have done a great job in bringing the USL into a viable market for the United States. I can see the growth potential now that I didn't see probably 10 years ago, 5 years ago even. But the USL is now starting to show what the sport can become, especially in a market like Spokane, in a successful team. So, Justin, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Eric, and thank you, Chairman Haynes and the Spokane Public Schools Board for having me here tonight. We've been working very hard to make the dream of having a professional soccer team in Spokane a reality for several years. And now we believe that this proposal is one that we think the community can really strongly support. I have the pleasure of working over 35 markets that we're working on expansion teams across the country. And I can say without a doubt, the level of enthusiasm, engagement, and support that we have seen in Spokane has exceeded any other market that we're working with. And just for context, the USL is building more stadiums and entertainment districts, stadium-anchored entertainment districts than any other league in the world. We have billions of dollars of projects all around the country, and those projects, like this one, are in our city's urban cores, because that's where we can generate the most economic impact and help stimulate the economy of our cities. The USL is very committed to the city of Spokane and the Spokane Public Schools to bring this downtown stadium to fruition. To make this a true partnership, the league and the team have committed up to $2 million in capital investment in this stadium. So what are some ways that your students will directly benefit from having a USL team in their market? First, a huge initiative at the league office, staying with my father who owns the league, and many of our 70+ staff, all the way down to our teams, is many of us played on some level and now are working on the business side of sports. Unlike so many industries that are losing jobs, the sports industry and the USL ecosystem on its own is going to generate thousands of jobs over the next several years. Importantly, those jobs are a wide range of skill sets that your students have, whether they are great at writing, design, sales, math, accounting, really across the board, those skill sets, there's a place for them in running the business side of a sports team. So that's one example. Another direct example is by having a USL professional team in Spokane, the top players, youth players on the boys and girls side, will then have the opportunity to participate in the USL Academy League, which will give those players a significantly higher chance of getting seen by the top college coaches around the country and eventually getting the scholarship. And lastly, our USL teams have so many amazing, impactful initiatives within their community, many of which are focused on children. Just two examples, our team in Oakland, the Oakland Roots, have the United Roots program, and they've been able to engage with thousands, primarily low-income youth children who are impacted either by domestic violence or other situations that they haven't had the opportunity to look at, where how they cultivate leadership skills, business skills, etc. And our team is really engaging with them. Our team in Hartford has partnered with Black & Decker, and this is where I know from working in Spokane, the corporate community would really engage and be a true partner in this, that they've worked on, one match a year, the proceeds go towards a charity. They've focused on Girls for Technology and the Boys and Girls Club, which they've had very successful partnerships with. So in closing, I just want to thank you again for your consideration of this proposal, and we look forward to further discussion as we really believe that we can create a true partnership and help the city and provide an amazing venue for Spokane Public Schools for football game and other events. So thank you again, and I'll turn it over to Mark.
Oh, thanks so much, Justin. We just want to say, first of all, I'm a really bad first lead on this presentation, since I didn't introduce my fellow panelists. And I also didn't introduce Stephanie Curran, who's on the call as a panelist tonight too, so that in case the board has questions of the Public Facilities District, Stephanie is the CEO for the PFD. And so she was kind enough to join us tonight, as well as Liz Hooker is my communications director. So my apologies to my fellow panelists. So before I just kind of wrap up, I just want to say, what Justin mentioned just kind of reminds me of a story. I had a chance to visit with a professional player just the other day, Hassani Dodson, who, if you look at our website, downtownspokanestadium.org, you'll see we've got a quote from him. And he talked about getting this first opportunity that came to him via scholarship from a coach at Oregon State University, because he had an opportunity to play up against a semi-pro team in his community over in the Seattle area. And he is just excited about the fact that maybe some athletes over in this area would have that same opportunity. So you really brought up an excellent point. So I'll just finish by just saying, tonight we're here obviously to ask you to consider taking action on this proposal. That action would include a commitment of moving the $31 million stadium funds to the downtown location, agreeing to the draft term sheets and to work with the PFD and the USL partners in formalizing and negotiating the details of those terms. But some of those, just to call out, that you have in front of you, I believe, the PFD ownership and operation of the stadium with a reversion clause back to the district to protect you and your taxpayers. The PFD would manage the stadium project design and construction. And that's just in our discussions with some of your staff, thinking that might be what you would prefer, with obviously direct and ongoing consultation and work hand in hand with the SPS and the USL. And I would just say, ideally, if we can find a way legally to do it, we would prefer just to be able to work with the same contractors you've worked with as well. It would also include a 30-year initial term, no-cost lease to the district with a 20-year extension provision. It would include the PFD managing and maintaining the stadium, helping to save the district that approximately $350,000 a year. And then also agreeing to the priority scheduling protocols that are laid out in that term sheet. So at the end of the day, we know this needs to be a win-win for the community and for the district. So if there are aspects of this that you would like changed or you'd like to negotiate or discuss, this partnership is certainly open to that discussion. And just for kind of an example, the motion that was passed unanimously by the Public Facilities District Board was to support the project concept and the spirit of the draft term sheet, subject to negotiation with you and USL should you agree to join the partnership. We understand this might be a hard ask. We know you have immense respect for your voters and your taxpayers who support the SPS throughout the years. Your track record, frankly, in terms of voter support is unparalleled. The 2018 advisory ballot measure, however, had some flaws in it we think that the board should also consider. The advisory vote wasn't consistent even with your district boundaries. Because the advisory vote was only appeared on the ballot within the city of Spokane, thousands, we think up to 10,000 of your SPS families and taxpayers weren't able to weigh in. And yet, because other school district boundaries come within the city of Spokane, thousands of voters outside the SPS district did vote, even though they don't contribute or pay taxes into your district. And then furthermore, thousands of people who voted in that 2018 election left this advisory vote blank, likely signaling a lack of information. And certainly what we've heard is a lot of confusion that was existing around that time. Additionally, this proposal has changed. It's improved since the voters weighed in, and it contains benefits that were not only, they just weren't a part of the previous proposal. For example, the concerns people expressed around parking and traffic around downtown location. We have studies that alleviate concerns over traffic congestion and have secured free parking for the SPS events, as well as adding new parking to the area. The proposal saves the district money, hundreds of thousands of dollars every year that will go back to the SPS budget and to support your students. That's new. And this proposal would also bring a professional sports team to Spokane. Again, what was a concept, an idea 2 years ago, now you have a firm commitment along with that financial commitment that Justin referenced and everything else that the USL brings. You know, the reality is Spokane has a long history of turning down big opportunities the first time they're considered. If we think back to like Expo 74, the Spokane Arena, we were just talking about leading into this call, STA's Central City line, all of these were initially turned down, but the leaders didn't give up because they could see the potential benefits to Spokane and to the community. So what they did was they took feedback from those who opposed those ideas, and they used that information to improve their proposals, ultimately creating phenomenal new opportunities for Spokane. And that's exactly what we're asking the SPS board to consider tonight. Please reconsider the 2018 SPS board vote, as much has changed and improved since our last proposal. Just from heart to heart, as a former elected official, I just want to tell you, I've been in your seat. I know how much you care about your constituents, your students, and your families who are part of the Spokane Public Schools. I know you care about your taxpayers and you want to make sure that you're the best steward you can possibly be of those financial resources that they trust you with. And I know how hard it is to consider new information and take a hard vote, change a vote, or change a decision. It's incredibly difficult. What I do feel is that the ones that I look back on seem to be some of the best decisions I ever made. The bottom line is by building the stadium downtown, you will have better aligned with your goals of increasing equity within the schools, the district. You'll have saved the district millions of dollars, money that you can redirect to the student programs and services. And you'll have helped your community grow jobs, economic opportunities, which is really especially welcome by those businesses right now and workers in the industries that have been hardest hit by the pandemic. We feel confident that the details and the benefit of this proposal are absolutely in the best interest of the district and your families, or we wouldn't be here. My board would not allow me to be here because that's their commitment. We're about win-win. We're about facilitating great partnerships and making great things happen together with community partners. And that's our goal today. So we are asking you to have the courage and the vision to vote yes on the downtown stadium. So finally, I would just say on behalf of my board and all of these great partners and many more who aren't here today, I just want to thank you for this opportunity to present this evening, even allowing us to share these ideas and new developments was a bold decision on your part. And we're very grateful and we recognize that and we're very humbled by that. So we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have at this time. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark and team. We appreciate you taking the time to come down and present to us. With that being said, we're open the floor now to any questions that board members may have for the presentation team or staff members.
All right. Well, this is Mike. I'll start. And first, I also wanted to just thank you for your efforts and vision. And Spokane's a great place, but it takes folks with vision and passion and the work ethic to get things done to move it forward even further. So I think my questions first want to start out with kind of the dollars and cents and looking at the term sheet and so forth. Why PFD ownership of the stadium, and is that a hard and fast thought, or is that something that could be discussed?
So maybe I'll start and then I'll kick it to Stephanie on behalf of the PFD. And I would just say that, that's just really our best effort to try to addressing what we felt we heard from folks that we talked with in the district in terms of your concerns and your goals. And one of those we felt was getting out of the stadium ownership and maintenance business. And so that's the primary focus there, is to try to honor perhaps that goal. So, I guess I would allow, obviously, Stephanie, maybe you kick in and share any thoughts that you have in terms of the PFD's perspective.
Sorry about that. Sure. To answer the simple question, it's definitely not a necessarily hard and fast rule. I think it was brought to us as a would we consider owning and operating, exactly for the reasons Mark Richard just described, that it was our understanding that the burden of owning and operating a stadium on the school district was obviously a heavy burden, whereas it's something we do every day with our other venues. So that was the thinking behind that.
Gotcha. And yeah, I think my reason for asking is really, as we have asked voters to provide their dollars for our bond, doing kind of a transfer like that feels like something that I'd want to understand a lot more. And then on a related note, the parking situation. So it sounds like there's about $7 million for land purchases that would need to be acquired. If USL does not stick around for 30 to 50 years and the partnership is dissolved at some point, really any point in time, am I correct that the PFD would continue to own the parking and the school system would own the stadium?
Stephanie, you want to take that one?
Sure. So it's my understanding, based on the term sheet, which obviously we would still need to negotiate and make sure everything was, we all agreed on everything. It's my understanding that if the USL were to leave, and if the PFD owned and operated the stadium, if the PFD owned and operated the stadium and the USL left, the stadium would remain with the PFD, unless, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, unless we didn't feel like we could do it anymore, and then it would go back to the school district if they wanted it, correct?
Yeah, I think that was our thinking, but again, it's just our best effort, Mike, to try to put this in a position where it makes the most sense for you and the district. So if I think that was the initial goal, honestly, we talked about making sure that we had a reversion clause into the term sheet. That if for some reason, I can't see a point where the PFD wouldn't be interested in helping to operate the facility, but if that were the case, and certainly, if the USL were to pull out for any reason, again, I can't see that being the case given the amount of money they're committing and so forth. But all that to say, we certainly contemplated the stadium reverting back. I think it makes logical sense. We should have a discussion about the real estate as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's just my interest that whether staying with Albee or considering something new, that the district has, at least 50 years of a stadium with commensurate parking available for no cost to our families and students. Let's see. So again, on the cost thing, your total cost for the stadium is something like $8 or $9 million less than we have budgeted. And I know there's some cost in there for some demolition of Albee and so forth, but wanted to understand a little bit more about those figures, because also I'll add on to that, cost overruns too. Like our district has been great about all of our even large projects coming in on budget or often a little bit under. And with this being having complexities of 3 different stakeholders' interests and that sort of thing, I'm not sure. It seems like cost overruns are probably more likely, and then we've already spent some money on design, and then somebody would have to demolish Albee. So where are those? Try to summarize, where are the dollars coming from to demolish Albee and to make that site available for fields? And then what about cost overruns for the downtown location?
Good. Yeah, go ahead. Did you want to take? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I heard somebody else. I'll take a run at that. There's a few of those things that I'm not entirely positive, Mike, and so I'm taking notes, and we'll make sure to get the answers for you. As far as the difference in costs, I know that there are some differences in the site in terms of the construction and the working in the bowl, the demo of Joe Albee and so forth, and so. I also know that with the USL having experience working with projects across the country that range anywhere from, I think, 8 million to probably 60 million or more, that I think is part of that work, and the difference of the nuance in the price reflects the fact, them kind of plugging in materials that they've used before without compromising ultimately what the school district is after. And we have, we've shared that information with Greg along the way, just to make sure. Yeah, go ahead. Did you want to?
Yeah, let me interrupt.
Go for it.
A little bit. Mike, there are significant differences in the facilities, in the construction and the makeup of the existing buildings. Not the least to say that we have a bowl that we would continue to work with at Joe Albee Stadium, which is really an apples and oranges comparison, along with all of the ancillary areas around the site itself. And so there are quite specific and sizable differences between those two stadiums to get Albee and the downtown stadium to have similar components. One thing we know for sure is that through our discussions and giving the programmatic studies that we've shown you throughout our development of the Joe Albee Stadium project through the EdSpec project, those have been pushed forward to the USL and their design team, and so they know the components and they know the needs of Spokane Public Schools and our expectations of facilities. So we feel that those components can be met within their budget, and we do feel that there is some difficulties or some differences, major differences in how we develop those two sites.
And Greg, can you answer that question? Because I know you've been very helpful in this process, us picking your brain in terms of the cost of the demo. That was a question Mike asked. Is that built into the proposed cost of this project?
So the demolition of Albee to level it for future use as a flat field is about $3 million, and that was those are numbers that we've developed over the years, but no, that's not a part of the 31 million.
It's not a part of the 31 million either. Okay, so it'd be outside this project scope, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And then your last question, Mike, is just cost overruns, especially what's happening with lumber and everything else, the oil and so forth. I think we can pretty well be assured that we're going to see a spike in materials. Go ahead, Greg.
one of the things that, we have just bid 2 middle schools, and our bids right now are extremely competitive.
Great.
Construction in the Spokane market is very robust, but looking forward in the next 2 years, there may not be quite the volume that we have right now. So I feel that there will be a very competitive nature in putting together costs and bidding for this project. And it is a very attractive project. All projects in Spokane proper are very attractive to local contractors, and we would continue to work with our local contractors and our existing team to make sure that we secured the best costs and the best prices, just as Stephanie and her team has done with the podium.
Yeah, I think you combine those things with the expertise from USL and the range of projects that they've been able to develop and still serve the needs. I think we're very confident that we can accomplish that and stay within budget.
Mark, this is Justin. Just real quick, if I could add, the USL as a league itself, as I mentioned, we are building the most stadiums of any league in the world currently, but we do have a lot of experience in this area, but to ensure that we really provided accurate numbers, for this project in Spokane and for the estimate, we engaged Odell, which is a leading sports stadium architectural firm, to the ones that actually developed those numbers. I think I just wanted to add that point as well.
And I guess it sounds like, the $31 million budget for Spokane schools, it sounds like there might be more than that needed in total to get to this vision of, fields at Merkel. I know the turf costs at Merkel are not part of your presentation whatsoever, but that would be a future cost. But the demolition, I think the district would have to be responsible for not leaving Albee as it is, right? We'd have to find some way to, whether the city takes back ownership of Albee or what have you, but that would have to be, sounds like something to be determined later. And I guess my question is it the assumption that SPS could say cap our 31 million, and if other things do come into play, cost overruns or other amenities or partial coverage or whatever, that would be covered by some other means, either investors or some kind of PFD investment?
Not sure. Greg, do you want to take that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure the answer to that, honestly. I think what I thought I heard Greg say is that the funds available for the demolition are outside this bond allocation, and so we wouldn't have to come up with those separately. But I would say that you're absolutely correct on the fields out at Merkel. Is that is not a funded project. As you saw from the presentation, we are getting some very positive reaction from the city of Spokane about working with the district. If you're interested in that, even considering putting this in for a future study, which they're planning on doing this year, to assess the needs of their citizens, and then potentially putting this into a bond measure if it showed up as a high priority.
And I would say, Mike, and Greg can kick in here, but we would have to look at our total project budget, not just, project by project, to see if we had the capacity to level Albee so that it wouldn't be an attractive nuisance next to our middle school, that we'd have until some future time when, if it's city parks takes it back over, or we do some other partnership land swaps so that they can develop more fields at Merkel, which they probably would have to seek funding for. But in our discussions with the park director, this is in their future view of a possibility that they would put into their strategic planning lens and efforts. And it's possible that it could be a part of something in the future. But Greg, your thoughts on the I think Mike's specific question of where would funding come to what to do with Albee.
Well, I think that the funding would come from savings from our existing projects, and you know, at our current climate right now, I feel confident that we'll have savings in our middle school projects in which that could be a funding source. Along the question of cost overruns, I think we have been involved in a multitude of projects since 2003, and we have proven a track record that we don't allow our projects to get beyond the scope or beyond the gap. And I think that our commitment as a district would be to continue to strive for those goals and to work with the design team to make sure that we meet those stated budgets.
And I think the other piece is as the Downtown Spokane Partnership and USL sought information from us to prepare a proposal, you will notice that even if and Stephanie and her team do a great job of building projects, doing a great job right now on the podium, but we would want to be a part of the design efforts and costing, because we have a proven track record. We do pretty good, so we'd want to be a part of that team.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And my last question before I turn it over to other board members, sorry for all the questions, but what about the Civic Theater? And this looks like it's maybe slightly closer than the plans from a couple of years ago. Can they operate their theater with 5,000 roaring fans?
That's a really good question. The Civic Theater they're partners of ours, they're members of ours, they're very important to the culture and the fabric of downtown. And so we did approach them early on and tried to see if they were interested in entertaining some sort of a movement. We introduced them to a couple of different facility owners to see if we couldn't spark up a partnership. Ultimately, the Civic Theater leadership decided those facilities, or that the one in particular that worked the best, wasn't going to work for them. So I can't exactly speak to the issue whether it will impact their shows or not, but I can tell you that they're very important to us, and we would continue to try to do everything we possibly could to make sure that they are, they can continue to do what they're doing, because they're providing an amazing experience, and just again, opportunity for our kiddos, all of those things that they're doing for our community. So I don't know exactly, but we certainly have not forgotten about them, and we would continue to try to facilitate solutions if they have challenges.
Thank you.
Great questions. Any other questions from anybody?
Yeah. Hi, thanks for the information this evening. I am wondering, what would your response be to those who are asking about the any negative economic impact of the surrounding neighborhood?
Yeah, that's a point I'm not hearing. I have not heard that, but I think with any project, in an infill kind of a situation, I suppose to some extent, Joalby in the redevelopment and whatever happens there is going to have some impact as well. It will create more car trips. It will create more folks coming to the area. What I can tell you is that so while I'm not really, we've got the analysis that shows I think that the roads can handle it. We've got the analysis that shows that we think we've got enough parking. But what I think is really powerful is we've got individuals from that we've had discussions with both locally and from across the country, frankly, that are aware that we are preparing this proposal and have an interest in investing in this neighborhood. One of the neat things about this site, Jenny, is that it's in an opportunity zone, as you're probably aware. And so that creates unique investment opportunities that are specifically geared towards private investors investing into, struggling neighborhoods, neighborhoods where the incomes are, below a certain level, where that investment can help, to boost up that local economy, create jobs, and then also raise the property values in that area for the people that are living there. So the whole intention of that was to create economic benefit to people in these neighborhoods. And I think we're already seeing some interest because of that opportunity zone overlay. So do you have any specific, was there a specific concern somebody had in terms of how they felt this would negatively impact them?
No, that's been kind of a reoccurring call out in some correspondence that we've given, and I haven't seen anybody address that, like rising home values. That
it could be a good and a bad, right?
Yeah, that exactly that. Our
Right.
taxpayers are already struggling to pay. So, and then another question that we're getting is why should the school district use bond dollars to subsidize this stadium, and if this venture is so viable, why not use private dollars to bring it here?
Great question, and I'll maybe ask Justin to chime in a little bit. But and Eric even, I know they can tell you that what you're seeing around the country, even you guys are doing this with your partnership with the city of Spokane. I think across the country you're seeing organizations looking more and more towards partnerships. We're seeing a lot more public-private partnerships because they work, because they leverage scarce dollars. They're able to deliver more for less money. So instead of building two different facilities, what would be most unfortunate is for us to go two different paths, Joalby to continue and not get utilized to its maximum the capacity that it can be. And then we build another and we spend another, whatever, 20 or $30 million on another stadium. It just doesn't seem like the right solution for anybody, frankly. So what we feel like here is that this is an ideal win-win. This is our opinion, obviously, is that we're able to deliver on a site that's centrally located. We're able to deliver the school district savings. Even if you took the $3 million for the demo of Joalby and you subtracted it from the estimated $17 million over the lifespan of the project in terms of what we think we can generate back to the district, it's still a $14 million plus net to the school district. In addition to creating just a phenomenal experience and access for your kids to professional athletes and different events and opportunities that we honestly don't believe will happen or could happen as easily if it's built in a remote site. So I think those are the reasons, is that you have the private sector looking for these partnerships. And what we're finding is the public sector is also looking for these partnerships. So you have a kind of a classic example in Spokane. You've got essentially the PFD, the public dollars that were used to build the arena. And then you have a private entity, which is the major tenant, which is the Chiefs. And then you have the same situation out at the Indian Stadium, Vista Stadium. The county owns that. Back when I was there, the county, we reinvested several $1 million into that facility. And yet that private owner operates that, generates an income for themselves, but they also create this phenomenal experience for the community. So I think this is a bit of the wave of the future, but you just have to decide, obviously, if this is the best fit for you. And that's the bottom line. We want it to be a good fit, a win-win.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Will SPS benefit in any other ways by use? Ticket sales? We talked about parking, advertising, concessions, or any of those details that can be shared or thought about?
So what you have in front of you in terms of the term sheet is a draft. It's a proposal. Again, what our hope is that we, by delivering the $350,000 back into the pockets for the school district, that's a pretty good positive win for you. We still have to make it work in terms of, private professional team owner, which is a rather expensive endeavor, to make sure that that it makes sense for them to even, to operate a team. And then again, for the partnership, we had to find a way to try to make sure that the PFD, who would then take on that responsibility of maintaining and operating the stadium, would have a way to recoup those costs that they would expend. So, so that's kind of the proposal you have in front of you. I think that the details, certainly can be ironed out, and we would love to share with you in great detail kind of how the consultant and how these different parties so far have come to these numbers, and see if there's some movement that could be done, if you felt like there was still more benefit that needed to happen for the school district.
And then a question for Cindy or in team. Have you vetted any of the financial analysis or projections? And likewise, Dr. Anderson, have you taken a look at the traffic study?
I'm not aware that so the traffic study was a couple years old, and in fact, I think that was done by the SPS at that time. I'm not aware if it was like peer reviewed. That's a very good question. And then maybe Justin, I don't know if you can speak. I think I'm pretty certain Odell's design analysis and the Johnson Consulting's economic analysis has not been peer reviewed. I would say the PFD gave us a pretty good ringing as they looked through in great detail and combed through and tried to get an independent assessment of whether those numbers were accurate or not. But we certainly have not peer reviewed those locally.
So I might say, Jenny, we commissioned the traffic study because that was a question our patrons had back in 2018. We hired a very reputable transportation and traffic consultant that we use for quite a few of our projects. And the results of that assessment, in sum, is that the street infrastructure could handle the current, could handle the downtown stadium in addition to the podium and the current arena. That if events, and it would be unusual, and Stephanie and I back 3 years ago, along with Cindy, studied how many overlapping events would we have at all three venues at once. Very rare, but occasional, that we, as Mark said earlier, employing traffic direction, human beings to help traffic flow may be needed, but on most occasions, the current traffic infrastructure and how the stadium would be designed with parking flows in and out of parking lots. And then even a bigger benefit compared to what we studied 3 years ago as far as parking is the current partnership's acquisition of a flat parking lot. Parking garages are very difficult to get in and out of, where if you have flat surface parking, like the current PFD does, and by obtaining more flat surface parking, that makes traffic flow better. And Stephanie's probably more knowledgeable about traffic flow in and out of her facility than I am. So.
Well, I can answer a couple of, or add a couple of things to that. So we do have a more recent traffic study that we did for the podium that I would be happy to share with you. It did not call for any additional improvements with the addition of the podium. And then when we do have large events, we have when we hit a certain threshold, and I think it's 8,000, we have police, and that number might be wrong. It might have changed. It used to be 8,000 police handling traffic on the streets. So there's partnership we have with the police department for that. And then one other thing that's actually really interesting about this proposal for me is the way the business in all of the buildings overlaps. So for example, high school football is obviously September through December. Indoor track, which would be at the podium, is December through March. March through May is volleyball season for us. And then May and June are the mat sports. So the judos, the karates, the gymnastics. And then layered on top of that, you would have Spokane Chiefs hockey, October through March, and then USL soccer, March through October. So everything sort of like one leads to the other to the other. So there's a couple of small overlaps for a few weeks here and there, but everything sort of follows each other. So not only would it activate that neighborhood for the whole year, but it also, in terms of jobs, it would keep the the part-time workers actually working year round instead of just seasonally. So that also helps with the traffic. The chances of having, you wouldn't have a soccer game and a hockey game the same night. You might have football and hockey, which we did look into that. And actually, when we did the study a couple years ago, the only actual conflict we ran into was Meade Mount Spokane playing in the downtown stadium, which obviously they now have their own stadium, so that their games against each other. So there's actually some interesting partnerships where it actually kind of works together well.
And then my last question before I'll turn it over to other board members, sorry. Has there been any type of environmental impact study done yet as far as noise and light pollution is called out by one of our constituents?
Not during my time on this project. I don't know if anybody else is familiar, Mark or Greg, maybe when you were involved a couple of years ago.
We haven't engaged in the permitting or in the permitting process, Jenny, when all of those items would get vetted with the city as far as the construction of the stadium. But with our study at Albee and our lighting systems at Albee, I think we have a little more sensitive neighborhood to worry about out there. And with the lighting designs, it really has been easy to engineer that meeting those standards that are expected through the city expectations.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We really appreciate these questions because it helps us to, go back and do additional research and whatnot. So don't hesitate, please.
Thank you. This is Erin. I want to thank you guys for the presentation first off. It's very informative, very helpful. Had a lot of my questions already answered from the other board members. I did have a question about the economic impact study that you had through Johnson's Consulting. And I don't know if you're able to kind of field this question, but on page 10 of the document, it was talking about the trends in the community, and it was talking about how a key indicator of the ability for supporting sports facilities is the income, the local market, and we are lower than the average, both nationally and in the state. And I'm just curious if you can kind of address whether that's a concern or why it's not a concern.
I wish I should have that study up in front of me. I'm embarrassed, Erin, so it's a great question. My recollection of that aspect of the study is that was one of the points that he makes, but I think overall, clearly he comes to the consulting firm comes to the conclusion that this economically does work. I think one of the things they talk about is the growth in population, if I'm not mistaken, and then even the rise in that median income. And then as well as that, I think he also speaks to the growing number of younger folks, which also happen to be a stronger demographic for sporting events. But I don't recall exactly how he kind of rectifies that. I'd be more than happy to study that further. And I see Justin thankfully throwing me a lifeline.
Sure. No, just one quick tidbit that I'd like to share is after we launched our team in Albuquerque, some of the folks there were telling me that before the USL team, they were last in household income, corporate base, basically 50th in everything out of 50 states. But with the USL team, they had an opportunity to compete on the stage and be first in something. And so they're again with as they said, at 50 out of 50, they were doing 15,000 people a game. So for us, it's household income is definitely not the indicator. I would say with USL teams, the opportunity for low cost family entertainment is something we think a lot about. And I know that with this centrally located stadium, the entire fan journey, we can really bring down the cost structure for families, and while maintaining a first-class fan experience in this beautiful downtown stadium.
Let me take a second. I can add a little bit to this, Aaron, also on the economic impact. First of all, let me share a little bit about what's going on in the world of sports. When you consider tourism and all different elements of tourism with convention travel and leisure travel, the one area of travel that has continued to grow even through the Great Recession was sports-related travel. It is the fastest growing segment of tourism. So the whole exercise for us as an organization is economic development, to bring as many visitors into the community, spending money, which then translates to an economic impact, which actually ultimately raises the tax base in the community to pay for public safety and road services, which lessens the cost that we each pay independently as much as $1,000 a month is what tourism, what we're seeing with tourism savings just for us individually. So the economic impact is about bringing the possibility of raising people's personal incomes to a point where we can at least get close to the national average.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point too. If you notice in that study, it also shows that it estimates about 71 permanent jobs created. And again, what we feel, even though we know this isn't your most important thing, your kiddos and your families are most important, but we do believe that this will have just a profound, different, positive impact on the economy. Like again, that eight times what we would see out of Joalby, and that's because we will get more of those fans and more of those folks coming from outside the area. We'll get more events, and that will go to support working, living wage jobs, all the way from the high school students serving tables downtown to people making a decent income in the hospitality industry, in the retail industry, and so forth. And so, I think that's what we see here is just the opportunity to help more folks come out of this little frump we're in because of the coronavirus and help them get back to work if they're out of work currently.
Appreciate it. Thank you for answering the question.
This is Nikki Lockwood, and I appreciate the questions from Director Zienert, Slagle, and Weiser. And thank you for your time. If there's the impact that you expect to our community over the many years, the financial improvements, I'm surprised that there isn't a more significant private investment up front. Can you speak to that?
Well, I think I'm not sure that I can directly. I mean, I think it's a valid question for sure. I think the reality here is that what our proposal is that without the district spending any more money, we believe we can actually improve the outcomes for your students and your families and the district, both in that experience, in that access, as well as the savings, and at the same time, being able to keep Stephanie's team whole and for her to pay the bills and for us to attract that professional team. The attraction of a professional team in itself, even though the USL is committing $2 million. We have another private investor that has already committed another $1 million that prefers not to be kind of identified at this point. And the permanent ownership of the team will require several $1 million investment as well. And so we do believe that investment will be there. And we also believe that this represents a good, strong win-win. Now, if the school district, again, if you decided you want to go forward with Joalby, this isn't the perfect fit for you. It may very well be that we go out and try to raise the monies privately because we really believe in this concept and this project. But as I mentioned, we think it would be a bit of a shame when we think this represents a tremendous win for everybody, including your taxpayers, to do it this way. But that is a possibility. And I think, I don't know if Justin, you want to speak to that, but I think what I've heard from Justin is, we'd love for this to work. We think this is a great way for us to interact with the kids and to be a community partner. If it doesn't work, I think Justin's team is interested in trying to figure out how to make this happen anyways. Am I mistaken?
No, Mark, I think you hit it exactly, and I think it's a great question. When we look at, in this case, that $2 million is really the baseline. We expect our owners to really contribute in so many different ways in the stadium, outside the stadium, philanthropically through, for their cities. And as Mark mentioned, we've just been really overwhelmed with the amount of support and people saying, how can I be involved? I love my city. I want to contribute to this. So I really see that as the baseline. Again, I think there's, the details to work out in the lease. But I have no doubt that the ownership will contribute well beyond in a variety of ways that $2 million baseline.
Okay, thank you. I do know soccer is like an international sport, and as a World Relief Site in Spokane, we have a lot of immigrant families. We have a lot of diversity. We have 77 languages in our school district. So I'm sure there are some soccer fans here. Another question I have is, no North Side precinct voted for the downtown site in the thing 2 years ago. It was the 15 wealthiest precincts that voted for it, in terms of the majority of those votes in the precincts. So what kind of outreach have you done to the neighborhoods around it, but also just the North Side? What kind of community outreach have you done to really get a sense of what people want?
Well, we haven't done any outreach. I'm just going to be plain and straightforward with you, which that's what you're always going to get from us. And the reason is because we didn't want to really have this public discussion until we had a plan that we thought was worthy of, sharing with you. And so to do that, we really had all of this work we did quietly and behind the scenes, because all the way along we were making this decision, a go, no go. And if we could put this piece of the puzzle in place, we felt like we could continue to move forward to the next challenge or issue that was raised by those voters in the past. But we felt like we had to do that quietly because we wanted to make sure that we had a solid plan, which we really feel we do. And then I would just say, I empathize with them and I empathize with you. This is a hard decision to make. I think what we've been able to show you is for the same amount of money, we can help more families. We can create better access for your kids, and we can put money back in the district. And to those things together with, we didn't have a commitment from a professional team at that time. We didn't have solutions to parking. There was just so much that wasn't known. In fact, I think many people at that time felt, are we voting on, revitalization of Joe Albi, or are we voting on a new stadium? And there was a lot of folks that were confused about that. We want to preserve our Joe Albi. And so just a lot of confusion. So we just feel like in so many ways, not the least of which is the pandemic and just more social awareness, we think 2 years is like a lifetime right now with what we've experienced in the last year. And as much as we understand and we respect their vote, we believe we have so much more information and such a more compelling argument to make that, that's why we're here. We're hopeful that you will see that.
I appreciate that honest answer. Do you think there's any, I appreciate, bringing up the equity issues, the transportation. It just, when I balance it with that vote, do you think there's any chance of like students just never having to pay to be in that stadium?
Well, I don't know about for all events, but we're certainly trying to make it accessible. Obviously you don't charge them. We provide free parking for their families. One of the things that we've heard, and I think it's a great discussion, we know that the mayor worked before with STA to provide free bus passes for kids in the district. I think that's a valuable conversation to have again. As far as free access to any and all events, I would suspect that's probably not going to be the case. But I think one of the things that we just experienced with the Riverfront Park is, that there were private partners that came together, not us, Numerica, and helped to fund access to the Sky Ride. And apparently it was a wild success with just so many kids that had never been able to ride on that ride. And so I certainly could see, I think opportunities created by the USL and by different venues where we open up access to particularly underprivileged kids, but just, having events. And in fact, that's one of the things I've been thinking about is like the savings that we could create for the district. One of the things we could do is we could repurpose that, if that was a goal of yours, and create more program, partner more with Spokane Parks, with the city parks, who already does this to an extent, and maybe provide more access to like free clinics or free, programs, camps, those kinds of things for kids. And what a beautiful facility to do it in. But I just be honest, I don't know how we would do the math to provide all the kids in the district free access to any event forever. It would probably crash the whole math equation.
Had to ask.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So right now you're looking at about 7 million for the parking, and that's approximately a quarter of, the amount that we have. So I don't know with our current plan at Albee what percentage was really going to go towards parking versus just the facility.
Greg can probably answer that.
Okay.
We have a lot of infrastructure work to do at Albee, sewer, parking, et cetera. So go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I don't really have a facility cost breakdown on what we were spending for parking lots or what we're spending for the infrastructure around the stadium off the top of my head. But, currently there are no parking lots. We have to improve them all. So they all have to be constructed. So I would say that, our expense in asphalt parking lots and those walk-up amenities and all of those infrastructure type things are a significant cost. I can research that and get a better number, but they're really it's really difficult to divorce them, because we wouldn't have a project if we don't have the parking lots and we don't have this. I mean, they don't. I can't pull them apart because I couldn't do one without the other.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if President Haynes has questions, so I can stop asking. You're on fine. Sometimes he just lets us go for it. But
if you have more questions, ask them. It's okay.
Well, I know I could probably go on all night. I was trying to consolidate. I'm not able to look through. I think most of them have been answered. Thank you.
Well, could I just say those are excellent questions. You're obviously representing your kids and your families, and all of these questions are amazing. I do want to just clarify that 7 million that we have towards land acquisition, that's actually 3 separate parcels. So only a portion of that is going towards parking. So just so you know, the rest of it is just to secure the pad that the stadium would sit on. And then I know you know this, but I think when we think about the private investment and the taxpayers' money, the taxpayer already obviously voted to support this. The stadium is going to get built one way or another, right? We just firmly believe that we can, in partnering with you and with this other public agency, not me, we're just a facilitator. The Downtown Spokane Partnership has no interest in this, but just our care for a vibrant and growing downtown, which we believe helps the whole region. But the notion of being able to come together with this partnership to create even more leveraging for those precious tax dollars that your voters entrusted you with, that's what we think the win-win is here. You could continue building out at Joe Albee. We just think there's so many positives to doing it in the downtown. You're going to be able to look back 5 years from now and say, look at what I delivered to you for the same amount of money. We would deliver a stadium out in a remote location that isn't very accessible, and wouldn't we'd end up spending $350,000 a year just to maintain it. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I did remember what I was going to ask, and it might be more for Cindy Coleman, just that we have spent around 900,000, I believe, in, the architects and the planning thus far for Joe Albee. So that's not really reimbursable, correct?
Greg, can you, since you're the lead, Greg, can you speak to what costs we've devoted and what of those costs would we incur regardless because we're building the middle school, and what costs would we incur if we're just doing the stadium?
Sure. So yeah, we have, obviously developed plans to build the stadium because we needed to do that. But along with the plans of the stadium, we also built the programmatic needs, which would have needed to be done for the downtown stadium as well as for the other stadiums. So those architectural costs are usable in both cases. Also, some of the infrastructure costs that we developed, since we had these two projects together, we hired the same civil architects and civil engineers and the same landscape engineers. And so we've really treated this as one site to make sure that when we brought in the infrastructure, of which we have brought in the infrastructure, we brought in the correct infrastructure to be able to handle both Joe Albee and the middle school. So the design costs for sewer and water that have been brought in would have been spent as well. So I would say that, we probably have $500,000 that we could solely chop out and call, stadium, that we would not get back. And if I dug deeper, I'd give a better outbreak, but much of the site work that we've already done, in bringing in the sewer and the water would have had to be done regardless of whether we replace Joe Albee or not, because of the real true needs of the middle school are far greater than what the infrastructure needs are for the stadium.
And one thought that just came to me too, Nikki, if you don't mind, Chairman Haynes, is just, you talked about the voters and who voted for it and who didn't. It just kind of struck me that it's interesting that the voters that are closest to Joe Albee voted for Joe Albee, and the ones furthest away voted against it, and so it's kind of interesting. And of course, we know many of the voters in the South Hill didn't even get to vote. But when we look at the South Hill being 10 miles, from Joe Albee, I don't know that it's an income issue as much as a disparity in, in just having a facility that's remotely close where parents can access after work and get their kids from here to there as equitably as folks that, currently are at the north side can with Joe Albee. So anyway, just a thought. I'm sorry, sir, I interrupted you.
No, that's perfectly fine. I was just jumping in to see if there were any last second questions from board members or staff. Yes, Director Slagle.
I might have missed it somewhere, but talking about jobs, in recognizing that many of the jobs for the stadium would be seasonal, part-time, low wage, minimum wage type of jobs, how many are you estimating that the stadium will bring if it's downtown?
So Stephanie can speak to her own team, but what I would share with you is that what we're talking about is jobs outside the stadium. We're talking about jobs across the entire community, because what we will see if we put more than double the events into this facility, and we were able to attract really for the first time high caliber tournaments for our kids, so they don't have to travel, to Yakima or to Seattle to play in that kind of caliber of game. All of those things are going to create jobs in our hotels, in our restaurants, in our retail shops. And it's not just downtown. I had a gentleman that owns a hotel out in the valley help me advocate before the Spokane Valley Chamber of Commerce asking for their support for this, because we know this is going to have a positive impact on jobs out in that area as well. And so, so just to be clear, that estimate is not like internal PFD jobs. This is really, you know, jobs out in our community, held many of them by parents in the district. So I don't know, Stephanie, if you have anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I do. I can shed a little light on that. So the PFD alone, we're not actually as big as everybody thinks. We have about 45 full-time employees and 15 part-time. But then of course we have thousands that we contract out for janitorial, ticketing, food and beverage, security, parking, etc. So that's just within the core of the PFD. But and the hospitality industry was actually, prior to COVID, it was the largest employer in the state of Washington. And obviously it has been the most devastated by this pandemic. In downtown Spokane, there are 30,000 hospitality jobs, 19,000 in, I'm sorry, my internet's having an issue, 19,000 in the hospitality sector, and then about 10,000 in retail. And then of course, the mission of the PFD is to generate economic impact. That's why we're here. That's why we do what we do. And so we generally support the hotels and the restaurants, but it also goes out throughout the region. So obviously the large convention hotels and the hotels where teams would likely stay or would be closer to the stadium. However, the compression that we create in the downtown core travels out throughout the region. So it's literally tens of thousands of jobs. And then like I mentioned earlier, with the way that the events would layer from building to building, instead of those people just being part-time, I mean, they might still be part-time in terms of hours, but they will be getting work all year round versus just at certain seasons, which is the benefit, obviously.
Thank you. And then my last question is, under what circumstances could the USL leave, or would they leave? And what's been your track record in other markets similar to ours?
It's a great question. And I think as Mark mentioned, we wanted to make sure that this was truly a private-public partnership, and that there was a firm commitment in major capital dollars to show the long-term commitment to the market. So in addition to the $2 million, the team would sign a long-term lease. And I think with, again, creating a downtown stadium, the attendance and the expectation we have that this to be a very successful team, we fully expect that commitment be made. When we look at across other teams, again, when we have the right venues, teams can be successful. So that's why we wanted to make sure that we have that commitment, but also make sure that the team, does have an economic model to be sustainable. And we think that we found that right balance between with the PFD, with the commitment upfront commitment of the money to the school district, while also maintaining the economic model to run a professional soccer team, which is very different than the hockey team or the baseball team, which for the soccer team, the team pays their players, unlike having a major league team that pays for them. So our economic structures are different. And again, I think we found the right model that provides opportunity and the likelihood for a very sustainable team, while ensuring that the PFD can operate successfully. And of course, most importantly, the school district and the investment that would go into the venue.
Justin, can you just touch briefly on your growth, what you've seen, in terms of growth in teams, a little bit about the track record that Jenny asked about?
Sure. So the USL, the current version of USL has been for 10 years. The league actually stretches back over 20 years, but under the current version of the league for 10 years. And in 2019, 2020 was an anomaly because we didn't have fans in the stands. We did over 3 million people. All of our games are on ESPN Plus. And over the course of our teams, again, we're building stadiums all across the country, and we're up to 47 teams today, and we'll be adding another 20, 25, 30 teams over the next 3 to 4 years.
Okay, in the spirit of time, we've already gone over our time before we're supposed to start our next meeting. We'll wrap this up. I did have some questions that obviously would take a lot longer to answer, but I'll make sure that the rest of the board is looped in my communication with those questions, and I'll just make sure to send them to you, Mark, if that's okay.
That would be great. Most welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, board members, for the opportunity you just gave to us, and just thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for the presentation and for your thoughtful responses to our questions by you and your team. The rest of my statements are for my fellow board members. I know that we have consistently made a commitment to hear feedback from our community members whenever possible. And so prior to addressing this topic and having board discussion amongst ourselves around this matter, I wanted to see if any of my fellow school board members would be interested in collecting community input prior to us having further discussions around this topic, outside of the emails that we receive.
In what form?
I hadn't gotten that far. We have a few community response and facilitation specialists within our staff, like Dr. Swinyard and Dr. Anderson. And so I was going to lean on their expertise if that was something the board was interested in, and asking them if they may have any ideas on how we could solicit feedback. Dr. Swinyard.
I just want to say, I think I'm not opposed to that by any means. I think from my perspective, the ship has sailed in terms of voter input, and I would like personally to go back if we move forward, I would want to go back to voters and community members. We didn't ask students, didn't hear from Ivy tonight, for example. So I definitely want more community input, but just wanted to throw it out there that to me, it would result in something that goes to voters.
Well, you do have some options. I'll give you some, if you don't mind. You could do a couple forms of community input, and I'm thinking of our current project schedule for Albee. So we are poised on letting out bids for the project underneath our general contractor, Garco Construction, at the end of March, with construction, if we stay on the current schedule, to begin in April. And that construction, along with the middle school, would span the course of the next year and a half, with it opening in August of 2022, along with the middle school. If you wanted to stay on that same schedule and look for a means to garner public input before you have a discussion about the proposal, we could hold a couple forums, public forums, and allow folks to testify to you. We could do that next week. Tuesday, Wednesday. We could also provide a written means to compile at the same time to allow people to, as they've already been doing, as you know, but maybe a little bit more formal means of collecting community input if folks would prefer to do it in writing versus provide testimony. If the board wants to do another vote, that would delay the Albee project. I think the soonest you could do a vote would be August of next year, possibly in June, but as I recall, I'd have to check with the elections office. It'd be August, and that then would pretty much push out the stadium project at Albee by about another year. So Cindy may know better on when the election opportunity is, but it certainly is past. We couldn't do it in April because we're past the timeline that we have to provide notice to the elections department for them to get geared up to organize the election. Cindy, I see you're looking. Is August the next opportunity?
Yeah, I have a cheat sheet over here. So to be on the August election, it would have to be, the election resolution would have to be filed by May 6th. Oh, hold on. I'm down a year. May 14th for an August 3rd election for 2021.
So options would be to get some quick response during the next week with opportunity both in writing and public testimony, or the longer view would be to wait till August or stay this current course of continuing our work at Albee.
Should one of the questions that, if we are doing public forums, should one of the questions be whether or not we should take it back to the voters?
That certainly could be some of the comments that folks would say, and my hunch would be requesting you to put it back to the voters. So that would be part of the public testimony you get. If we do an advisory vote again, there is a cost. I believe an election cost is around $100,000. So we'd need to figure that into our budget.
Yeah, personally, I don't know about doing another advisory vote. I think that each of us were elected to lead and lead based off of the best of information that we have available, including community input. I don't know. I would just caution us from allowing that to make any decisions on our behalf, basically.
Yeah, I hear your point. Totally. I agree. We don't normally do that, but in this case we did. And it was overwhelming. So that's where I'm coming from.
I agree. We didn't do it. To be clear, we didn't put an advisory vote on the ballot. But there was an advisory vote, yes, Director Weiser.
I'm not opposed to more community input.
So President Haynes, we can certainly develop some strategies for community input next week. We could share that in the Friday delivery, start communicating that out if that's the interest of the board, and then certainly then schedule a follow-up agenda item for the school board to continue the discourse.
Good to me. What about everyone else?
Good.
Okay, seeing head nod from everyone else. I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much, Mark Richards and team. We appreciate you all taking the time out of your busy schedules and for what appears to be a lot of work and a lot of thoughtful conversations. Thank you for presenting to us and answering all of our questions for you this evening. We'll, I'm assuming, be in contact soon in one way or another. And yeah. To the rest of the board, we have one more agenda item on our special meeting this evening. It's discuss calendaring future items. I recommend that we move that to the end of our regular meeting. Is everyone comfortable with that? Seeing head nods. Okay, good. We're already running behind. So what I'll do is I'll give us 3 minutes to transition over into our regular meeting, and we will start at about 7:16. Sound good? All right. With that,
this link or
same link, easy transition. All right. Thank you to everybody for tuning in, and Those of you that are sticking around for the regular meeting, we'll see you in a sec. Bye, everybody. Hey, Sandra. Hey, Phil. Good to see y'all.
Hi.
How things going for you, Sandra? Pretty
Good.
busy time for you, I'm sure.
Yes, it's all fun now, isn't it?
I like it. I get excited.
I do
Anytime we get this type of community involvement, it's an exciting time for me. So I like it.
Me too.
Good. What about you, Phil? Keeping you busy?
Busy just scratches the surface, I think. It's been crazy. It's good to have a more normal activities, in the schools and everything. It's been pretty exciting. Exciting.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Well, I hope that amongst your busy schedule, you're able to find time to decompress whenever possible.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Yeah. You and a lot of other staff members. Hey, Becky.
Hey.
Speaking of, right?
Speaking of compression.
Yes, speaking of compression.
I don't know how Becky does it.
I'm really sorry about the mess down in the boardroom.
No, you're fine. It's okay. It's not as bad when I have all this space to myself, I just appreciate you all so much, allowing me to use your space in the meantime.
Would any other board members like to read the people's acknowledgement tonight?
I can, or I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
All right, looks like everybody's back and ready to go. So, hello and good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to this Wednesday, March 10th, regular meeting of the Board of Directors of Spokane Public Schools. Thank you for tuning in and joining us this evening. Just a few quick logistical items, but by completing the registration link provided to you, members of the public are able to attend the meeting of the school board by utilizing the audio and visual tools that are available by Zoom. We'd like to make sure that you keep your microphones muted throughout the duration of the meeting. If you wish to participate in the public comment portion of this meeting, please use the registration link that was provided for you and complete the appropriate portions of the registration in order to request a time to speak. Members of the public that wish to speak, on items that are not on the agenda, your chance to speak comes very early in the meeting agenda, so please make sure you get your request in as soon as possible. If your item is an item on the agenda, you'll be asked to wait until after that agenda item has been presented. With that being said, Rochelle, may I have the roll call, please?
President Haynes.
Here.
Vice President Weiser.
Here.
Director Lockwood.
Here.
Director Slagle.
Here.
Director Zienert.
Here.
And Student Advisor Ivy Pete.
Here.
Thank you, Rochelle. Next up, we'll have our flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up, we have introductions. Joining us this evening, we have our superintendent, Dr. Adam Swinyer, our associate superintendent, Dr. Mark Anderson, our executive assistant to the school board and the superintendent, Rochelle Miller, and we have a whole host of other superstars in our school district. We have Sandra Gerard, Phil Wright, Heather Bybee, Becky Dowdy, Sean Jordan, Cindy Coleman, and I'm sure a bunch of other staff members that are looking to join us later on in this meeting this evening. So thank you all for joining in and supporting us through this process. Next up, we have item D, our People's Acknowledgement.
I will be reading the People's Acknowledgement tonight.
Thank you.
Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will, some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life, and some have lived on this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. So we begin this meeting acknowledging that we are on the ancestral lands of the Spokane tribe of Indians and a multitude of tribes who are connected through shared history of trade, celebration, and resources. We make this acknowledgement to pay respect to their elders, past and present, whose knowledge remains on the land. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us here together today. And please join us in continuing to learn about such truths and actions we can take towards restorative justice.
Thank you, Director Zienert. Next up, we have, again, our procedure for hearing from the community. Like I mentioned earlier, by completing the registration link that was provided to you, you will be able to utilize that to request a time to speak and have your comment heard publicly this evening. So please make sure to get those in. That agenda item will be up in a matter of moments. Next up on our agenda, we have item 3A, changes in the agenda from the board or administration. I'm seeing none. Parliamentarian, Director Weiser, do we have to add in a formal process the agenda planning?
Oh, sorry, we should do that, yes, sorry. I totally forgot about that. I think you could request it though as president.
Well, I would like to ask my fellow board members for permission to add our agenda planning and who's attending discussion at the end of our meeting, right after board reports.
Do you need a motion or second or anything?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Consensus, right?
Oh, yep.
Okay, we'll consider that a thing. Next up on our agenda, we have approval of minutes. May I have a motion, please?
Sure, this is Mike. A motion to approve the February 3rd special meeting executive and 6 p.m. and the February 10th special meeting minutes as posted in board docs.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. We would consider those approved. Next up, item 5, hearing from the community on items that are not on the agenda. As of right now, I only have one comment card, correct, Rochelle? And so with that being said, I will ask for Aubrey Susan, I apologize if I said your name wrong, to be brought over into the panelist side, and you will be given 5 minutes to provide your comments. Know that because there's an item that is not on the agenda, board members and staff members are not allowed to engage in discussion. But with that being said, Aubrey, you're up.
Thank you. Yeah, good evening to you all. I'm just here to speak about the current practice that in an attempt to keep kids safe by requiring students to mask during lunch, specifically in between bites. This isn't supported by any literature, and the literature that does exist is compelling and considerable, says that this is absolutely the wrong process to keep kids safe. Therefore, my request is that this practice be discontinued immediately and that we follow suggested literature. Thank you for your time and attention. I don't need the rest of the time.
Well, thank you, Aubrey. That was pretty quick. Not engaging in back and forth with you. I know that I was made aware earlier this afternoon that that I'll probably be meeting with you sometime soon as you and Rochelle are able to match calendars. I look forward to having a more robust conversation with you on this topic.
Me too.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Next up, we have agenda item 6A, early board reports. Report from our student advisor, Ivy Pete. How's it going, Ivy?
Awesome. I just wanted to check we weren't echoing. I'm doing great this evening. Thank you. I know in the interest of time, I'll keep this pretty quick. What has been really exciting lately is the implementation of land acknowledgements at the beginning of school every day. I've had overwhelming response from colleagues and friends, text messages saying, this is so awesome, super exciting. So a thank you to the implementation of that, and also just an acknowledgement that it's a huge step forward and is really exciting from the student body. So thank you.
Can I ask a question? This is Nikki Lockwood, Ivy Pete. Is that just at your school or is it at all the schools? This is new to me.
Yeah, to my knowledge, it's implemented at North Central. It might be at Rogers right now and looking to expand.
Great, thanks.
I'll make a request after, but it's concerning the land acknowledgements later. So thank you though. Thanks for sharing that, Ivy.
Thank you for sharing, Ivy. Our student advisory reports are always one of my favorite parts of the meeting. Next up, we have our consent agenda, item 7. May I have a motion, please?
This is Nikki Lockwood. I can move to approve the consent agenda.
This is Erin. I can second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any comments or questions from school board members or staff?
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
I'm just really excited about item F on the consent agenda, that we are buying furniture because we have 92 ECAP slots for this year for early learning. And so we need some furniture to accommodate those new little learners. And that this is just really good for our community to have more spaces for early learning, knowing that that helps set up students for success when they're entering elementary. So really excited about that.
Thank you. I agree. I'm excited too. There's another agenda item that I'm excited about. I see a lot of new nominations on our list. You know, one being Mr. Sean Jordan. I'm excited for your new role and to see you step into that and for us to not lose you from our district office. So I look forward to seeing you shine bright in your new role soon. And I also see that we've also made a few nominations from like Lori Wyberney, you know, that will be moving toward the district office soon and everything. So I'm just excited for all of the potential changes that are happening and going on. And I hope that you all are excited about that too.
Thank you, President Haynes. Absolutely very excited.
Yes, sir. Well, you're someone that I've witnessed personally lead with integrity over my 5 years here now. And so I know that's just a part of who you are. And I look forward to you continuing to lead with integrity in your new role. So thank you so much, Sean.
Thank you.
Can I say congratulations, Sean, as well?
Thank you, Nikki.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Sean.
Thanks, Jenny. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more comments or questions from school board members or staff, I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say nay. Hearing and seeing all ayes, the motion has been approved. Consent agenda has passed. Next up, we have our special agenda items. Item 8A, North Central High School request to change mascot or symbol presented by representatives from North Central High School. This is a discussion item.
And President Haynes, as a prelude to this presentation, Dr. Anderson is going to be providing a policy overview for the public because this is a new policy revision.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Dr. Anderson.
Thank you. So policy 6970 guides the consideration of naming new schools, renaming schools, dedication of schools, facilities, and naming and changing school mascots. This is a policy and procedure that you updated recently to allow for this type of consideration that you'll hear tonight. So just as a reminder, stakeholder groups can submit requests for a change of a school name or a mascot as step one. Step two, then, that request can be considered for placing on a school board agenda. Item three, or third step in the process, is if it's placed on the agenda, which this one has been, so North Central went through steps 1 and 2, the individual or group does make a presentation to the school board, in this case on the changing of a school symbol or mascot for North Central High School and the rationale behind it. Then after the presentation, if the school board decides to consider the request to rename a school, or in this case, change a school mascot, the board needs to hold a public hearing at a regular school board meeting in the future to seek input from all patrons. So it needs to be well advertised as part of our regular board agenda information and a public hearing held. After that public hearing and that board meeting, if the school board would decide to make a decision on to grant the request to change a school name, or in this case, a school mascot, then a new mascot would need to be recommended to the school board for approval. after a school, in this case, have gone through staff, student, community, some kind of input process to bring a recommendation of a new mascot to you. For schools, the process that we're going to go through in naming new schools would occur, so that you would go out, we would solicit new suggested names for a school from the community. A screening committee would get together, screen the names, recommend 3 new names to the school board, and the board would pick one. So renaming a school is a little bit longer and more elaborate process than changing a school mascot. We kind of delegate that to the school to make sure they have involved staff, students, and community members getting input about any kind of new school mascot. So this evening, you are at step 3 for the North Central group to submit a request and a presentation for changing their school symbol and mascot. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, President Haynes, to have the folks present.
All right, thank you, Dr. Anderson. With that being said, I am excited to hear from Principal of North Central High School, Steve Fisk, and I'm assuming our wonderful student advisor as a student at North Central and a leader in this discussion, Ivy Pete, will be joining in on that discussion also. So with that being said, Steve, take it away.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure to introduce Ivy Pete. She is a North Central High School terrific student, and over an 18-month period, along with other students, led some really integral work in terms of our symbol at North Central High School. And over that 18 months, I really want to make sure that I shine a light on student voice. And so Ivy, take it from here. And then I'm available to answer any questions that you might have. Okay.
Hello everyone, Pesa Amamua Inanine Ivy, Noya Aponumu Puama Ave Paya Hunadu. Hello, my name is Ivy. Like I said, I am Paiute from Northern Nevada and a junior at North Central. So I will start just briefly by taking you through the history of North Central in its relation to the Indians, just for a little bit of context, as it would be a falsity to say that this conversation originated 18 months ago. So during its first 17 years, North Central had no mascot, and nationally mascots were not widely popularized in general. And so in the fall of 1923, actually, North Central adopted the name Indians as a mascot, and this was directly preceding the end of the Indian Wars. And so school identity became really deeply intertwined at this point with the use of these images, even as the decades went on. And especially into the 60s, there was a national movement that began, led by Indigenous activists, that began that conversation around the use of mascots, which was first addressing professional sports teams, later into colleges, and eventually into the high school level. And so what we're here doing tonight is really a culmination of generations of work. The first majority student movement at North Central against North Central's mascot, I suppose, was led by students in 1991. And timely enough, in 1993, the Washington State Board of Education decided all public schools and public school districts in the state should ask their communities to help them review school names and mascots for racial stereotypes. So at the time at North Central's request was to consult with the Spokane tribe. And from there, the relation still exists today, and we exercise it regularly. And even throughout the 90s, the debate remained subdued until around the spring of 1970, or sorry, not the 90s, the spring of 1977, when the Colville Confederated Tribes asked the Colville public schools to change their mascots. And so heavily influenced by that decision, then North Central's principal, Mike McGuire, launched this 2-year process to reevaluate the NC mascot, brought in stakeholders into the process, including the Spokane tribe once again. 2 years later, December of 1999, their new solution to this issue was to bring the question to a school-wide vote. And so out of 1,085 students, 464 of them voted to retain Indians as a symbol and pick a new mascot. 334 voted to retain Indians as a symbol, but choose no mascot. And 287 voted to keep the Indians as both a symbol and a mascot. Now, this is will become apparent later. It's pretty important. The mid-2000s did not really hold any major conflict regarding the topic, but yeah, it is imperative to note that North Central did not choose a new mascot as per the students' election because they could not reach a consensus on the animal. So ever since, we've been operating with a symbol but no mascot. And that was, of course, many decades, very condensed. So I understand if you have questions, happy to answer those after. So specifically why I'm here tonight, up to present day, in February of 2019, then junior Olivia Tabish addressed North Central admin about her current concerns regarding the mascot. I was onboarded into the process in May of 2019, and over the course of these, 2-3 years, I'm now here to speak with you. Before COVID, we engaged in a similar process to that of the school in 1997. Principal Fisk met with the Spokane Tribe of Indians in October of 2019 and apprised them of this renewed conversation from the student body. In January of 2020, admin began communications with our native identifying families about what was going on in school. And then in February, students presented to the North Central staff as well as to the Alumni Association. So we've been through this similar process, talking with stakeholders, moving through, making sure that we're gathering community input. And so now I'm going to take the time and share more about why I'm here this evening. And just 2 little notes. I've been called upon to present this request rather than Mr. Fisk because it has been and continues to be completely and fully fueled by student voice, specifically Native American student voice. Second being, for the purpose of our dialogue, I'm going to refer to the Indians as a mascot, as unfortunately it has been something similar in practice without the designation of one in the 90s. It's sort of crept back in. And so, yeah, with that, we'll jump right in. North Central is bonded by the phrase, "We are family always," but I can tell you that many of our Indigenous students do not feel this way. Our school community, student body, and staff do not intend harm, but harm is being done and we are not being listened to. And so I speak tonight on behalf of an entire community that has been habitually silenced for generations because we are the dissenting Indigenous voices that demand not only equitable opportunity, but reparative justice for the harm perpetuated by the use of a derogatory Indian mascot. And I hope they will feel empowered should the board grant us the opportunity to share their stories in public testimony later on. Procedure 6970 will help walk alongside us in mending these broken relationships between North Central and its Indigenous students and families, as well as our greater community and tribal neighbors. And as I've kind of worked through this process, I've heard a lot of things and I'd like to share briefly with you. There are 2 really large misunderstandings that we as students hear often, as Native students. The first being that the use of Native American related or Indian mascots is honoring the Spokane tribe and Indigenous people. And I can tell you this is not true. Each tribe's culture and creation story is different, and that's not a surprise. I mean, my people have fought the loss of culture, language, land, and family since colonization. And this is a perpetual dehumanizing image that really does cast aside the struggles of our local Indigenous students, mythologizing our culture and our lived experience. And you may have heard me say it in the news or over and over again, just because I do not look like the mannequin in the case at the front of the office does not make me any less Indigenous. And this is a statement I've been working to get out for 4 years now. I recently discovered my hesitations are caused by the same roots of erasure that these images were designed to perpetuate. The concept of Indian as a one-size-fits-all was not designed by another Indian. It was designed by those aiming to oppress and homogenize us. And it is grossly frustrating and inappropriate to continually hear, "You should feel honored." As an Indigenous student, I would ask, why do we need to feel honored by something that is not representative of us? We need to feel honored by the fact that simply taking up space is contrary to what we read in our history books. This is not the way to honor Native people and Native students. And so the vote to proceed with our request is to honor these students that are making progress in SPS today. And if I may say, there are many of us. The second misconception I'll just briefly address is that it's tradition, it's our history. And I will say, this is not an attempt to erase North Central's history. Now is the time to move forward with our students' well-being at the forefront, because as long as we retain the name Indians at North Central, it is at the expense of the true and real depiction of Native students and their connections to their peoples, their nations, and their cultures. As a student, it makes it extremely difficult to validate my own identity when I'm constantly being shown images of what I should look like or how I should act. I mean, the traditions of my Numu people and of the Spokane people and of all other nations represented in our school and in our community goes back time immemorial, from generation to generation. And North Central's relationship to the Indian mascots and symbols is less than 100 years old. There should be no argument when we are weighing a solution to the century-long denigration of culture and identity versus the preservation of a decades-long high school tradition. The real traditions we do uphold surrounding this verbiage and logos, albeit not as overt as they once were in history, symbolize a living culture as extinct and honor the idea of a passive, silent, and defeated Native. No student or group of students should have to carry the burden of representing an entire culture on their backs because the system cannot accurately and respectfully educate students for them. The picture we paint of these mascots is not of a real human, group of humans, or culture. It is a selection of preconceived notions and ideas that we have the opportunity to set straight. And very lastly, perhaps even more egregious than the last two fallacies is this hostility and harassment that this mascot shields. When community members attack a high school age Native girl at the grocery store for refusing to wear an image that she knows is wrong, when alumni curse out race-based slurs and attack Native existence in the comments of a student's social media post, when a Native cheerleader feels shame and hatred for having to force the racist words out of her mouth at a basketball game, this should be enough. This should be enough for North Central and Spokane Public Schools to fulfill their promise to and condemn and end hatred and harm to our Native students perpetuated by the use of Indian mascots. So with that, I request that the board protect me and all other students like me, those dissenting voices in the 70s and those in the building today by supporting our request. Haumu.
Thank you for that, Ivy. Before discussing next steps, are there any comments or questions from any board members?
I think we just need to give it a minute. Oh my gosh, that was powerful. Thank you, Ivy. That was awesome. I definitely applaud the school and the school district reaching out to the Spokane tribe a couple of times that they did that you mentioned. And I just wanted to note that, you know, city of Spokane has about 15,000 Native American people living here in this area that come from over 300 different tribes across the US. So that, you know, for you to be able to be carrying this and creating a positive narrative for all of the students from across the US here that are represented in our district, that's so powerful. And I just thank you for bringing this forward, moving it forward and bringing light to it. So.
This is Nikki Lockwood. I also thank you for your presentation and being so thorough for everybody so they can understand, you know, the work that's been done and the hopefully damage that we can address with this. I really do think that personally, I think this is really important, and I'm glad to be a school board member who can look forward to kind of working on some repair for this issue. This is important to me.
and this is Mike. I just wanted to say excellent work, Ivy, in your advocacy and your history and sharing that context and how it affects students today. And it's sounds like it's past due that we are at this point, but like Director Lockwood said, it's nice to be part of that and support you and fellow students who are affected by this.
Yeah, I just want to echo that and thank you very much for just the way that you contextualize that for us. I think, you know, we read the People's Acknowledgement at the beginning of our regular meetings, and one of the last lines is that we're going to continue to learn about the truth and any of the actions we can make towards restorative justice. If we're going to say those lines, we also need to be thinking about ways that we can actually do that. Thank you for bringing this up.
Yeah, I echo the comments of my fellow board members. I want to thank you, Ivy, for sharing your feelings and for building and seeking out this request. So with that being said, based on our board policies and procedures, our school board members open to moving forward the next step in this process, which is collecting community input on the concept of changing the North Central mascot. And if so, we could have district staff work on scheduling a forum, which would then be followed on a later date for the board to discuss and consider the request in a formal sense.
Absolutely.
I'm hearing and seeing all yeses. So that's great. Again, thank you so very much, Ivy, for your passion and your advocacy for doing the right thing and continuing to push us forward and move our district forward and our school forward. And thank you, Principal Fisk, for even creating the environment where this is possible, right? So thank you all.
This is Nikki. Can I just say one last thing? I appreciate you bringing this forward so quickly, you know, considering we just made this policy adjustment to address this. And, you know, Ivy, for you to be able to kind of see this hopefully to fruition within your school, you know, time, I just, that's gotta, I hope that feels good to be able to see that change, because sometimes we know change takes a long time, and it has taken a long time, but for you to see it within your high school years, I hope that feels good for all your efforts.
Absolutely. I think we heard that from Olivia Tavish as well. As long as this is still an issue, she will be here speaking, and I will be too. So glad to see this moving forward, and we are very appreciative.
So President Haynes, we will, district leadership will work on scheduling those forums, and then we will calendar this agenda item back at a regular meeting after the forums, where the board would consider potential action on the request.
Perfect. So again, thank you. And we'll move forward to our next agenda item, item 8B. School reopening plan update presented by Drs. Adam Swinyard, Dr. Mark Anderson, and Heather Bidey.
Yes, thank you, President Haynes, members of the board. This is our regular update on our reopening process for our schools. So we are here this evening to share some information and updates relative to that process. As board members are well aware, we welcomed our secondary students back on March 1st. And we've had an opportunity to visit those schools, collect input from staff, from students, from families, from principals. And there is just a general excitement and appreciation to be back in our buildings. We're, of course, working through details as they emerge, but all indications is that it has been a very positive transition, and the fruition of our planning has afforded us the opportunity to support our students as we reopen and phase back our students. So Dr. Anderson is going to lead us through the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Swinyard. As a reminder, our reopening plan since the beginning has been with a commitment to follow the direction and guidance of public health officials, which we have been doing with our phased-in plan with now all of our students back in a hybrid model at our secondary level to keep students 6 feet apart. And as you know, we've determined it is safe to have all of our kids back at this point in time. And the plan that we've developed, clear from last summer, has been, its core has been safety strategies. And our Safety and Operations Committee of the Safe School Reopening Task Force that started last spring, we have continued to meet weekly to make sure that our staff is well trained, our students are well trained, we have the appropriate protocols in place, and we'll be talking about some of those protocols in more detail tonight, but cleaning is one of those, and we've invited Phil Wright from our facility department to talk about that. The social distancing standards, the wearing of masks and the requirements, again, following the health department requirements there. The health check process, Becky Dowdy and her team of nurses rigorously doing contact tracing, sometimes 24/7, 7 days a week. Auditing our safety practices, making our principals our COVID building supervisors, and for that they have responsibilities to oversee the safety and that these protocols are being handled. We have a COVID hotline, tip line. We've got the alternating schedules going at grades 5 through 12. School-based COVID testing program, been very popular. Becky and her team has been doing that. And now this evening, Becky will update you on the vaccination of K-12 staff, which has been moved up in the priority list. And with that, I'll let Becky talk about our current data on information about COVID.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. So since October 5th, we have had 257 cases. 10 of those originated in our buildings, and the remainder, 247, have had external origins. So people, again, have caught COVID out in their own lives. We have quarantined a total of 2,089 staff and students, and 689 of those quarantined were exposed in our buildings. And right now, numbers are looking great in the community and in the district, and we are currently only quarantining 171 people.
And this is the dashboard that matches what Becky just said that we have up on our district website with kind of the school by school cases, and you can see the ups and downs of our contact tracing and quarantining of staff. With that, as you know, we have moved into phase 3 with our middle and high school students coming back last week. And I might just pause a bit. Sean Jordan has did a lot of work with middle and high school principals along with Heather, and maybe Bybee, maybe they can give just a quick update on how it's going in the first couple weeks.
Me to go first?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, I would just, in general, just say all of the feedback that we're receiving from our school leaders, our secondary school leaders, is really positive. All of the planning that we did, the many months of planning that we did with various protocols has really played out well. The challenge areas that we were really putting detailed work into included the entry plan, where for the high schools like Lewis and Clark, they're bringing in about 900 students, and they're ensuring that each of them have completed the health check. And so there's just very, very specific, as you know, detailed plans for that, and that has gone really, really well. All of them are getting students, all the students in within a 10-minute period at the various entry levels. And most students are completing the health check, which is making that process go really, really well. The other challenging places with our planning was the lunch time, where students had to be in assigned seats, had to be sitting 6 feet apart. And those assigned seats are for the duration of the remainder of the school year. And again, schools did it a little bit different.
Not all of them did it the same, but all of them are providing positive feedback. One principal said, smooth as peanut butter. It was the way in which she phrased it has gone thus far. So overall, there are obviously adjustments that each school had to make as they were analyzing the first few days. Lots of communication and reinforcement. There have not been the concerns or challenges relative to students following through with all of the safety protocols. And so again, overall, my report to you would be that it's gone very, very well.
And the only thing I would add, and it kind of adds to what Sean was saying, is just how joyful the staff is to see the kids' faces, right? That they have been 8 months behind a screen, and to get to see the kids and have them in their room and start to build that community back in real world and not in a three-dimensional world has been really positive.
When we talked a few weeks ago, there was some angst that existed out there amongst both students and staff and families about what this was going to feel like and look like. And as soon as we got into the first couple days, there was the feedback again that I've been receiving from school leaders is that there was more of a relaxed feeling that this was going to be okay. And a lot, it was just about getting into the plan and experiencing it to relieve all that anxiety.
We had
I can attest to that.
Go ahead, Ivy.
Sorry, Dr. Anderson. I just wanted to say I can attest to that for sure. I was hesitant, nervous, a little anxious, but day one for sure feeling much better and more positive than I expected to. Even the second day, and I could tell teachers still just had as much excitement to see me and my friends. And you know, walking into calculus day one, I understood probably twice as much as I have all year. So we're very appreciative, and I think as well, even just with policy and how it works moving through the building, it's going smoothly. It's not as hard as I thought it would be to follow the little taped arrows on the ground. So.
We had our safety and operations meeting on a Thursday, the first week of secondary students being back, and we have a middle school and a high school principal on our committee. And I don't know if you've experienced this, Ivy, but they all said, the kids are so quiet. It's like eerie. That may not last for long, though. So these are all the factors, you know, that Adam has gone over before, and maybe he wants to highlight them again, but this is what we've been using to kind of move forward with our plan.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Anderson. So we've been monitoring these very closely. As board members, I'm sure are well aware, we're continuing to see a decrease in our county case-wide trend. Our school transmission rate has stayed steady at 10 cases. And Phil and Dr. Anderson and the work that they've done around cleaning, we've been able to maintain those cleaning standards. Substitute failed to fills, contact tracing. I was just talking with Becky, communicating back and forth prior to the meeting, and contact tracing. That was something that we were very conscious of, that by returning middle and high school, there would be an additional demand on contact tracing. And those protocols and those resources are all in place, and by all accounts, things are going very well. And we'll let Becky speak here in a minute around our vaccine distribution. And there's just really been an incredible effort to vaccinate our staff, but also Spokane Public Schools has played a role in supporting our other area school districts. So we'll let Becky speak to that here in a minute.
So one of the items that we worked on all summer, Phil Wright led this work along with our Safety and Operations Committee, was we used the term, we're all in this together, both our custodial staff, our support staff, our teaching staff. And so we spent a great deal of time developing protocols and then training each grade level of teachers as they came back on cleaning protocols. So Phil, I'll let you highlight these and then some of the work that we've done with staff in this area.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, as you can imagine, this was a pretty heavy lift for the district team to achieve this higher disinfection standard, and it it took an army. It really did, and we're super appreciative of the teaching staff and the office staff and our custodial team, everyone that contributed to making this work for us. So, starting with our custodial team, our daytime custodial staff, between the hours of 9 and 11, goes through and does a high-touch disinfection of the schools. They're out there. They're being seen. They're performing high-touch disinfection of drinking fountains and elevator buttons and handrails and the entry points, door hardware, all these areas that are touched frequently during that morning entry period. And then they continue with the rest of their protocols for the rest of their workload for the day. Our night staff has a pretty heavy involvement in this disinfection as well. So they do their normal routine for cleaning in the classrooms, sweeping, vacuuming, spot mopping of floors, but they also do a high-touch disinfection of the classrooms, which is not accessible to them during the daytime. So that includes, again, sinks, light switches, drinking fountains in the classrooms, doorknobs, all those high contact points in the classroom, pencil sharpeners, things of that nature. We also are participating in removal of trash. As you know, the elementary schools are eating in the classroom, so it's really important that wet waste is being managed properly. So our elementary school custodians are involved very heavily in that process during the daytime hours, and normal trash removal occurs during the night shift. So on top of that, the district has put a lot of effort forth in training classroom teachers to also participate in disinfection by disinfecting the desks. So the district developed a training video, which has been made available to all the teaching staff. And we've also developed a disinfection guideline, which has also been provided. So at the elementary school level, elementary school teachers are disinfecting the desks once per day. We give them a little flexibility on when that's done, depending on what fits best for their activities in the classroom. At the secondary level, where we have different cohorts of students who are coming and going from the rooms, we clean or disinfect those desks in between every cohort of students. So that was an area that gave a lot of concern to some of the teaching staff. They have obviously a busy schedule, and with a 4-minute transition time, there were concerns about being able to get that done. So we developed 2 actual options for teachers to use. They can do a spray and wipe of the desks, and they can also do a spray and no wipe. And so the spray and no wipe allows them to spray these desks down and simply let them dry naturally without having to do a lot of extra effort in the wiping downs. So every classroom is equipped with a cleaning caddy, what we call it. And in that there are nitrile gloves, there's single fold paper towels, and there's 2 disinfectant products in there. And our custodial staff in the evening comes around and replenishes those products so they have enough for the next day. But what the teachers are asked to do is they're asked to spray every desk down and go through and do a quick wipe. And of course, that disinfectant needs to stay on that desk surface for about 5 minutes. And then on top of that, our task force also developed more specific disinfection recommendations for some of the different program areas. That would include like health and fitness and athletics and CTE and science and music. So on top of these standards, which are kind of universal to all the classroom settings, we have some more detailed recommendations that are being implemented by those different program areas. So.
And I say that Phil then worked with Sandra Gerard and her team. They actually did training videos that we sent out to staff. And then I included in your board background materials on this particular agenda item. Phil worked to develop a very detailed document on how to clean your classroom for the teachers. So after we trained them on it, showed them a video on it, then they had a kind of a hard copy document that they could have at their desk, so to speak, to review and understand. And then there's been questions about it. I know that Sean and his team of secondary administrators fielded a lot of those questions, and Phil helped get those answers back through principals to their teachers. So I would have to say that with good training, teamwork, we're keeping our classrooms cleaner and disinfected to a much higher level than we've done ever before. With that, we'll turn back to Becky, some of the good news item about vaccines.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Anderson. Very, very good news. I feel like we're getting a good handle on this. And so as everybody knows now, all K-12 staff are eligible for vaccine. And so we were already working towards that. And then with this news from the governor and in partnership with our local health department, we've put our plan into action, even at greater numbers. And so we ourselves, and when I say we, I mean my nursing staff and myself, we have done about 1,000 vaccines for our staff. We are working on getting an idea of numbers of staff who have gone outside of our own clinics to get the vaccine since they're eligible. There was a pop-up clinic at Gonzaga operated by Chaz, and I know many of our staff members went to that clinic, and of course Providence and other area providers are giving out doses to our staff members. And so we do know for sure that we've gotten about 1,000, and we do know, of course, that there are many more who are getting it elsewhere. So our clinic on Saturday, this coming Saturday at Ferris, we will be administering 1,080 doses, and that clinic is open to all area K-12 staff and childcare workers. And so the health department has put a big emphasis on equitable distribution of vaccine. And so we want to make sure that we are offering it to staff members who may have difficulty accessing vaccines, may not have access to providers. And so we are working with the health department to make sure that we get the vaccine to people who need it the most.
So with that, we continue to monitor data constantly about how we're doing in contact tracing and cases. Continue to work, as I mentioned, on a weekly basis with our safety protocols. Continue to have conversations with our local health department. I know that Sean and teams of athletic directors have met a couple times with the health department regarding extracurricular activities, ability for fans and so forth. And Sean, I don't know if you have any latest update on where we are with our athletics after school.
Sure, and we're in season 1. We're in the middle of season 1, and those sports are volleyball, football, and girls soccer, and finally boys and girls cross country. They did kind of a tiered start, so they didn't all start on the same date, but they are all now playing games. The challenge with spectators has to do with the Phase 2 sports competition guidelines that puts a cap at a total of 200 individuals at the event. That includes the participants. So what happens with the different sports, there are a different number of participants, which then limits the number of spectators. And so the most up-to-date information, we kind of did a slow roll into this whole process. We made inside much different than outside. So volleyball inside, we had a much tighter protocol. And to date, we are allowing there to be each home team, whichever level it is, varsity, JV, freshman, can have 2 family guests attend. And we just added that the visitors for varsity and any seniors at the sub-varsity levels can also bring 2 family guests, and there's a pass list that has the names on them. And so we monitor those family guests coming in. We make sure that they are willing to follow our safety protocols with the masking and the social distancing in the stands. And they do confirm that they don't have any of the symptoms associated with COVID. The soccer being outside, we are now up to, as long as we don't exceed the 200, which for the most part we don't, all of the games, both the home team and the visitor, all levels can have 2 family guests. And if it is, if the home team is able, they can allow the participants for the home teams to have more than 2 if a particular student has more than 2 family members that they would like to attend, as long as we don't exceed that 200. Cross country and football have created a much greater challenge with spectators, and that largely has to do with the number of participants. For our 3A and our 4A schools in the league, they can very easily, with the teams, with the managers, with the coaches, with the trainers, with the cheerleaders, with the officials, and the coaches, they can very easily get up to that 200 level. And so right now it's really, really difficult for football, for the 3A and 4A to have any spectators. There may be some games, and it all depends on the 2 teams that are playing, where there might be like 20 additional spots. And right now that is being prioritized for the home team senior parents. But again, there's challenges because it might not include everyone, every senior parent. So there's challenges that in each game, and the 2 athletic directors are working through to make that happen. I will say that all of the football venues in the GSL have the ability for live streaming, and so anybody can get online and actually be able to access and view the game, just not in person. And a reminder that because our Spokane stadium, Albee, is not available for games, all of our Spokane teams are playing their home games at our visiting teams, outlying district home fields. And so there's a partnership and an agreement for this particular year, and will be again for next fall with that particular situation. And then finally, cross country, which just started competitions this week. When you look at a cross country meet that has both the boys team and the girls team, and it's 3 schools, and they have all of the levels there, the varsity, the JV, as well as will be the freshman teams, that in itself can take you up to 200 participants. And so again, the spectators at the start and finish line is restricted for only the participants. And what we've asked, because those cross country meets are spread out in parks and school campuses over a 3-mile course, we've asked parents, if they arrive, that they spread themselves out on the course, again following all of our safety protocols, and that they stay off the course. And as long as they're staying away from the start and finish line, we're accepting that. We are partnered with the Spokane Regional Health District as an entire GSL with the guidelines that we've communicated out. And I think a revised guidelines just were sent out to families today with the update, with our interest at this point to try and get to that 200 cap to include any spectators we can bring to all of the different sporting events. We have not made any decisions about spectators in season 2, which will be starting right at the start of our spring break in April. But we are meeting as it's called the Spokane County Superintendent Subgroup. It has a mix of superintendents, principals, athletic directors, along with the leaders of the GSL for making all of these decisions and communicating them out to principals and then out to families.
So with that, Dr. Swinyard, any closing thoughts on our reopening implementation?
Nope, just we're going to continue to work the plan that we've developed and make sure we're taking input from families and making adjustments along the way. So with that, any questions or comments the board might have?
I went to Salk on the opening day. It was just wanted to say it was really nice to see kids back, and you could really tell it was the first day of school for a lot of them. Asking, I was just standing there with Principal McFarland for a while, and had like 10 kids. Where's Mrs. So-and-so's class? And the staff were all out supporting those students. That was great to see. And then I was also impressed by walking in a few classrooms, and most of which were talking about social emotional stuff, get to know you exercises, and talking about just, how it's going and what concerns they have about reopening. And so really taking the time to treat it like the first day of school and to start with relationships, which is definitely the right approach. And my daughter's reported the same sort of thing. So I think it's all good. And I'm sure it's going to be not too long before we start to hear about wanting to get into, 5-day-a-week sort of scenario. And I guess I will mention at the Community Advisory Council, that was, I think the comments from parents were not so much about how the in-person days are going, because it sounded like it's going pretty well, but more about those off days and, either too much work to do or not enough work to do. And I know that Heather and everyone's working on that kind of smoothing that out a bit, but I've definitely seen that with my middle schooler as well too. So be looking forward to next year and being 5 days a week. I'm sure we'll figure out the hybrid here before we're there.
I share that struggle as well, figuring out how much I should be doing on the off day, as well as rolling out of bed at 8 a.m. when, I could be in bed till noon. So figuring out how to do those assignments. And I think teachers are being super receptive as well with their students. How much work is this? What is the workload like for you? And we're super appreciative for that. But the continued push to be getting that work. And the one question I did have is it hasn't been communicated super clear to students on what attendance looks like on the days off. We know we need to be logging into Teams, but there's no not a lot of communication from teachers on what that looks like or what it should look like, or the time or anything of that nature. So that might be something just in my cohort, but I have a feeling it's kind of across the board.
Thanks, Ivy. We'll follow up on that communication piece. It's great feedback.
Just a couple of comments. This is Nikki Lockwood. I'm just really grateful that the day after we started secondary, we got that good news about K through 12 educators being able to get vaccinated. It's just awesome timing for us. And I'm glad to know that, I talked to several educators or saw on Facebook that they'd already signed up for their vaccine or even, gotten it this past week. So just really grateful for that movement. I also appreciated getting the detailed cleaning instruction that was in our board document, just to see what that looks like. Knowing what we're asking our educators to do is, I think, important. So I appreciated seeing that, and that we have some ways to do that without as much work. I was at Westview Elementary today, and I did not realize that my brother's father-in-law was a custodian there. So he lowered his mask and said, hi Nikki. And so she shared how it was going at her school, and she just really appreciates all the work that's happening to keep everybody clean. And I visited 2 schools this week, and it seems like the pandemic has allowed for some just innovation and kind of flexibility in seating as well with students of all ages. So that's been good to see. I know that at Westview, she was wondering how they're going to do human growth and development, the 5th and 6th grade with cohorts, with needing to break them up, by male students and female students. So things to continue to work through for sure. And then, I know there was a parent email, and I'm sure Director Weiser mentioned, just 5 days a week at the secondary level, but like with the 6-foot rule, we can't do that yet. Like that's a big change that would have to happen.
Correct. That's the most significant factor in what would prohibit us from having all of our students in the building at the same time. So until that 6-foot distancing requirement is either rescinded or modified, we would not be able to meet the guidelines and have all kids attend.
Yeah, I was at the large school district caucus earlier this week, and it sounded like the most significant change that we would need to see, even just looking at next year. So, and it's primarily for secondary for us, but I guess in general. Yeah, just thanks for all the ongoing work.
Just might end maybe a bit of good news this week on the financial front, thanks to heavy lifting by Heather. We were required under the new regulations to submit a new reopening plan to OSPI. And Heather did a lot of the work on that. We got it submitted on time and got notified this week that OSPI approved it, which has some, I believe, financial opportunities for us that Cindy will be working with OSPI on getting some funding that based on our new approved reopening plan.
Thank you, Heather. Just say that.
If there are no more comments or questions from board members or staff, thank you, Dr. A. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Phil, for the presentation and the updates. We appreciate all of your hard work. Next up on our agenda, we have Business School Support Services Budget Priority and Principles presented by Dr. Adam Swinyard and Cindy Coleman. And this is a potential action item.
Yes. Yes, a little climatic there. Yes, potential action item. So this is a follow-up agenda item to review the budget principles and priorities for the upcoming school year. So this is a same presentation that board members saw the other day or last week, excuse me. So we'll just jump right to the revisions so board members can see. Cindy and I worked to take in the suggested revisions that were offered at last week's work session. You'll see those highlighted in red. We also got some suggested language via Director Lockwood. And so you can see that down here at the bottom in the notes. And it was relative to the third item. So I'll just go through these really quickly. Principle number 1, protect basic needs for educating the whole child. Next principle, provide equitable distribution of resources that recognize the diverse needs of students. Implement academic programs focused on closing the opportunity gap. So that was the one that Director Lockwood shared some suggested language. Next item, maintain essential support services. Meet legal compliance and educational standards. And then this was one that we attempted to incorporate board feedback. So we'll look for any guidance you have on future revisions of this bullet. Support the implementation and sustainability of the district's strategic plan. So any additional feedback on these draft principles? And then we'll just leave Director Lockwood to share her suggested bullet if she'd like.
Should I do that now or?
Whoever wants to go first.
Oh yeah, whoever wants to go first. I mean, I do appreciate the strategic plan part in there, and I don't know how much overlap, looking at the suggested explicit language around kind of some of the issues that we're addressing in educating our students, but that was what I was wondering about including. So, the opportunity gap is kind of vague, but, explicitly what we're really, looking at addressing with that are the negative impacts of poverty, racism, and I put ableism as the, 3 that I thought of, and that addresses like the neurodiversity of our students and other types of disabilities and mental health challenges, but there's certainly other kinds of issues maybe that we would want to include. So I didn't know if we wanted to include some more explicit language here. And I'm open to that. This was just a first draft of something I was thinking that I wanted to at least give you time to think about as my fellow board members before we talk today. So that's why I put some pen to paper, but I'm certainly open to thoughts of other ways to incorporate this or to see if it's going to be included in some of these other bullets that we think is adequate. I'll leave it there.
I support the change. Nikki and I had a chance to have a good discussion about some of the coded language that is often used in our education system. And I agree. I think if we can make these slight adjustments to start moving away from the type of language, I think it would be really, it would be good for us to do that.
Any other board comment on moving that and replacing this bullet?
Sorry, I do support the idea of changing it from closing the opportunity gap to addressing the negative impacts of poverty, racism, and ableism. Is that is that a period? Is there two sentences there, or is it? And then, oh, this would get, okay. So I guess I just would want to keep it short. I think it's more powerful when it's shorter. So could it end there, I guess is my question. Because this, and in terms of allocating resources to mitigate these impacts, like all these budget principles are about allocating resources to address, the statement. So I think that, to me, that goes without saying.
That sounds, I appreciate that input. Because I was writing it in an email, I probably put more than, less is. So that makes sense.
Yeah, great point.
So focus on addressing the negative, missing the word addressing there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Or should I, sorry, I guess that's in my head, it would be focused on addressing, but.
Yeah.
So take this part out. Is that what you're saying, Director Weiser?
No, I was saying add the word focused on addressing.
Yes, I agree. I felt like I had that in there, and maybe that. Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe so.
It might have got lost in translation, Director Lockwood, because we overlaid it on the sentence stem. So.
Yeah, because the academic programming focused on those, addressing those issues. Yeah, makes more sense.
Okay, very good. Any other feedback on our planning principles before we move to priorities? Okay, very good. So we'll go to priorities. Any feedback here? You can see here the red line edits from our conversation: provide anti-racism and social emotional learning programs and services, as well as integrate trauma-informed practices within available resources. So there was board feedback around incorporating trauma-informed practices. And then there was feedback around a standalone agenda item for ensuring support for the district's equity resolution. So any other additional feedback? Okay, we will, at this point, we can either open it up for a board member to motion for approval, or if there's interest for there to be more time to consider these, we can bring them back on another agenda. So we can approve tonight, or board members can take more time to review and reflect. So whatever direction you have for us.
I'd be ready to approve.
I'm ready to vote.
We'll entertain a motion then.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the budget planning priorities and what's the title of the other?
Principles.
Principles, priorities and principles for our 20, do we have to state the year? 21, 22. Sorry.
This is Nikki Lockwood. I can second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any other questions or comments from board members or staff? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Hearing and seeing all ayes, the motion has been approved.
Great. Thank you so much, board members. This will be a really valuable document as Cindy and I work with the rest of the team to develop the budget. So we'll be scheduling budget agenda items with you as we better understand our revenue picture and we start developing our budget outlook and the composition of our budget moving forward. So plenty more budget items, agenda items to come.
Perfect, thank you. Next up on our agenda, we have item 10A, board reports. What do we have, people?
I'll go really quickly. Yesterday, the Spokane Public Schools Foundation Board met their monthly meeting and they're working with district staff and SCA to get some communication out for an additional call to our educators to apply for some of the grant funding that's available. Their funding requests are pretty low right now, so just encourage our educators to ask for funding to provide any type of resources for their classroom. So that's available. We had an initial discussion, which was very encouraging around supporting early childhood education. And they thought that maybe they could amend the bylaws potentially to look at providing some support towards early childhood education, whether that's directly to parents or to the school district. And I gave Dr. Swinard a heads up, and he shared with me about that it was very timely that that we were being allocated additional slots for early childhood. So that's really great news.
That's really good news. That'd be exciting. This is Nikki. I can share quickly. I went to Glover and Westview, as I mentioned. You know, Glover is really being innovative in how they're offering kind of another option for students that still want to stay virtual primarily, but want to stay connected with their classrooms. They figured out how to do that for a smaller group of students. And so that, you know, it's innovative. And some of them are coming into sort of a cafe situation, but they're not ready to be in the classroom with students. So it's just, it's nice that there's the flexibility to serve the students, you know, at certain schools. They also have a strategic learning framework that they created. And at the top of it is one of our bullet items from the equity resolution, kind of guiding that, the one about student-centered learning, about to provide cultural connections to curriculum, student agency, project-based learning, and competency-centered structures for grading, course completion, and advancement. So it's exciting to see the equity resolution, you know, come to life in different ways. And they're really using that, the technology as the core, of content, and then just the support from the teachers when they're there. And then I mentioned Westview. I will say that they have a couple of BI classrooms at Westview, the behavior intervention classrooms, and they showed some success with students getting into those general ed classrooms, taking the time and working towards those goals with students, having more inclusive classroom environments very successfully, and decreasing the use of the isolation rooms, and just saying that there's always a need for just that ongoing de-escalation, especially with, to classrooms like that. So the de-escalation training and supports are always a good thing to be continuing to look at, and supporting the staff that are in those classrooms. And then I also went to that large school district caucus where they asked two questions. What do we need to open up fully for next year? What do we need? And so some of that was discussed, definitely the 6-foot rule, and having OSPI and LNI kind of aligned on what they're going to ask, or the Department of Health and LNI, I'm not quite sure, but just aligning the requirements so that we can do that with our union partners. And then the other question was, what budget issues are related to school reopening, or just this year? What budget issues are we still needing from the legislature? So a lot of similar issues to what we had around transportation, and then just the enrollment stabilization kind of things. There were a few others. Some huge school districts have had less than 1% enrollment change, so that it's not as big of an impact as it has been for us over here on the east side in general. The Racial Equity Subcommittee of the Superintendent's Work Group on Restorative Practices met. They're going to give input on the equity resolution, or the equity policy, I mean. And so that is something that everybody was given, and as well as WASDA has a link with several equity resolutions or equity policies. And so, the homework was to review all that and come back with input for the next one, which is next Monday, I believe. Boundary Committee started looking at just some middle school feeder plans and a couple of different options as far as the grade schools and how that goes. And it's really kind of putting it all together, what the community has been sharing. And it's just this ongoing commitment from the community that is amazing. And they continue to email in between and say, I thought about this and I thought about that. So they're just really committed to that work, and seem to care about the whole district, beyond their individual, section of it. I just really appreciate that. And one last thing, there's a statewide group, the Endowment for Equal Justice, and they are going to have a panel discussion called Let's Talk About Injustice, and is kind of in parentheses, and they're going to have one on education, and they asked me to speak at that. And so that's on the 23rd of March, and I'm excited to share the work that has happened locally that I think we can be really proud of in addressing some of that. So I think that's all. Thank you.
And I mentioned a couple of activities, but I also wanted to mention that what I learned from CAC, I didn't quite realize in terms of our virtual model next year. There's Adam can speak this much better than me, but there's going to be not only SVL, which is mostly asynchronous, but and of course in person, but also an option that's more like today's virtual option, or I should say yesterday's virtual option, or last month's virtual option. So I think that's a big deal, and it's, I think, a pretty big change. And Adam, you mentioned like up to, if could be like a school's worth of kids who want to do more of like a synchronous virtual model, and that would be a big shift and change. And so it seems likely that they'll still have lots of families next year who are going to be wanting to have an option like that. And also even after COVID, that kind of synchronous virtual model might be really compelling for some students.
So on Monday, Director Lockwood and I both attended the parent listening session that occurred, and the two main questions that were presented were, do you think commemorative heritage observances are accurately acknowledged in your student school? And do you think teachers are equipped to teach and lead conversations about these observances? And the resounding answer on both of those was no. So there's this conversation about how that would look in the actual schools and what needs to be done, or what kind of thoughts we have as to what parents think need to be done in order to really make that reality. So that was one of the meetings that I attended. I was reached out to by Principal Adrian of Stevens Elementary kind of last minute. They did a kindness drive over the month of February. They collected diapers and other kind of family items for a local emergency shelter in their community. And he asked if I wanted to attend their dropping off of the materials. And so I was able to see it in time to actually get to do so. It's a really great opportunity to just see the kids out there delivering the goods that they collected, and also getting a conversation with the elementary school with all the students back. And Principal Adrian says that it's overall going really, really well. The students are so glad to be back. The teachers are glad to have the students back. And so it was just an overwhelmingly positive experience. That's all I have.
Perfect, fellow board member, for sharing all of that. Next up, we have item 11, questions, requests from board regarding upcoming presentations and district events.
One question, I guess, is would we get another legislative update before session ends, or maybe a couple weeks before session ends? Like, kind of, I wonder if there might be something that comes up that we need to advocate for or want to advocate for that we haven't put on our formal list.
Yeah, so we've been providing the Melissa's legislative updates in your weekly emails. So Director Weiser, are you wondering about the possibility of having Melissa come meet with the board?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay.
If there's no, I guess the implication with written updates is there's no need for us to do any action beyond Director Lockwood and Haynes, but I guess maybe if there is, it would be nice to have time set aside to have that discussion. But
yeah, I'll just share that there hasn't been a need. I mean, we had our initial meetings and then we haven't testified or anything. So I was waiting in the wings. So
okay.
That's my understanding as well, Director Weiser. Quite different than other years, right?
Yeah, there's something.
Yeah, there's usually something. So there, to my understanding, consistent with Director Lockwood, there hasn't been anything that's come up that Melissa's felt like she would be suggesting that we step in and really advocate about. But that certainly still could be the case, although things are they're starting to have some of their cutoff periods. But I can loop back with Melissa and just kind of confirm if she sees anything on the horizon.
Okay, yeah, I'm totally fine with that. Thank you.
do we usually have some kind of summary at the end of the legislative season? Like a recap? Okay, but that'd be after April, correct? Okay, and then President Haynes, I know that the SAC 3 students requested, they shared a resolution and requested a meeting or to be on the working session. Are we just going to meet with them? I can't remember. Are we just going to meet with them, the two of us first, or? Okay. And that's
being... Yeah, that was the plan, was for us to sit down and meet with them and go over the resolution before bringing it forward during the work session.
Okay. So I'll just wait to hear from about planning that
meeting. Yeah.
It won't be at their meeting, it will be a separate meeting?
Yes.
They have their regular meeting, okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
And I just have one. So I think it's great that schools are doing land acknowledgements, and I just really appreciate that the board, that we've adopted one that we do at our regular board meetings. I just found out that they were also found out that the schools were doing land acknowledgements. I'm wondering, how can the district help ensure that schools that are doing it are set up for successful conversations around the subject, or where it involves Native American topics. And I'm wondering if there's any interest in standardizing, maybe utilizing the land acknowledgement that the board has adopted and used, but also wondering, so there's a couple of things going on. As you're aware, last year, the Indian Education Program contracted with Kaufman and Associates to do, to invite tribes and tribal organizations leaders to confer with them and develop a strategic plan around how they want to establish some priorities around Indian education, and how students, we could help address some of the issues. That got rescheduled, kept getting pushed back. We thought maybe it was going to be the fall, but it looks like the Indian Education Program has scheduled it for mid-May, I believe. So they're working on a formal letter to send out to tribal leaders in a government-to-government relationship. That invitation is more formal, and it goes from the highest level of officials to tribal councils, and then the tribes or tribal organization can determine who should be attending those any given meeting. So that is going out, and I thought maybe if it's something that the board doesn't want to decide on, like a district-wide, maybe we could include in our strategic planning in May to present the people's acknowledgement to our tribal leaders, and get any input so that we can move forward with something, but also maybe develop some type of learning opportunity for educators and families to learn more about why we do people acknowledgements. I felt comfortable for us to do it only after we had the discussion and provided some talking points of how we develop one and why we do it, and some of the components of a land or people's acknowledgement. And even just like, for me, moving away from the terminology land acknowledgement, that in itself is a discussion that I think we should be, that our educators or whoever's doing the land acknowledgement or acknowledgement should also be having or even aware of. So I don't know if that should come from a policy or procedure, or how we want to address that, but.
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe we can debrief a little bit as our leadership team and come back on just kind of the best route, and give the board some options of how to pursue that, whether through a procedure or whether some just general guidance to schools. Yep, we can.
And happy to share the information, the bullet points that I shared last year with the board. I can resend that to you.
Okay, great.
So President Haynes and members of the board, just to clarify, I know we were went a little long on our work session tonight with the proposal for the downtown stadium. And I just wanted to clarify for staff if we needed to do something. I think I heard the board wanting further public input. We could put together a couple public hearings next week, starting at 6:30 in the evening. We could do it Tuesday, Wednesday. Wednesday, I see you, I looked at your board agenda planning calendar and you didn't have anything scheduled for your regular work session, so we could do that in lieu of that. We could have Sandra and her team advertise that availability for folks to come and provide public testimony. We could do a short recap presentation of what the proposal is that we're seeking input on, kind of to start each forum if you would like, and then basically have the public have the opportunity to provide testimony on the proposal. Have you listened to that testimony? A couple other options we could also, in addition, if folks are uncomfortable, providing public testimony, we could provide some kind of comment approach to do that. Adam and I and Sandra have also talked about the option of doing a thought exchange for the whole community, which is another method of getting people's thoughts and having folks weigh in on thoughts. We could, do all of that, over the next week or so. And then I think once you've heard public input, and you're already receiving some, I know, in emails to the board, I think Aaron's been busy having to answer a lot of those. We could then come back on the 24th if you liked. And finally, you can have your discussion after hearing what others are saying. Then the other thing I would offer, if you didn't get all your questions answered, I would be glad to be the collector of those. And either if we know the answer internally from, if there are questions for district staff about our project that we've got going, or if we know the answers, we could get, if there's questions for the downtown Spokane partners and USL proposal, we could, I could get those over to Mr. Richards and have him get back with answers too, if you didn't get all your questions answered tonight, or if more questions in your mind come up, if you hear public comment that you would like to have an answer to from someone. So open to what your thoughts are on next steps. I just wanted to make sure I knew what you were interested in. Kind of, we were rushed right there at the end of the work session.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. A, for surfacing that and bringing it back around. I think if my understanding was accurate, the board agreed to seek out more community input. I think that the idea around a thought exchange is a potentially valuable one, right? I think that provides a easy way for us to actually be able to weigh, how many people in the community are pro and or against. But I think the most valuable point of a thought exchange is that we actually get to be able to hear from our students and see what they are on this topic, and hear from staff members and see what they are on this topic, and also do things that maybe a vote doesn't do, and potentially ask people, okay, well, if you're for this option, why? And really dive deeper into and get a real understanding on where our community is. I like that option personally, and I do like, of course, the idea of doing the community forums next week if we're able to, with obviously Sandra and her team's help, get the word out well enough to get community engagement high enough on those forums.
So I think I heard you say, President Haynes, was you like the idea of a thought exchange as a way to maybe more methodically collect community input, in a way that, you're gonna see data in a different way than you would if you just had people fill out a comment form, obviously. And then in addition to that, you're suggesting that we also then would do the community forums, so people could come have voice in the community forum, but then they could also do the thought exchange. And on the thought exchange, just so that we're really clear, if that is the interest to do a thought exchange, then the intent would be to make it available to any and all, right? Because that we have staff members that don't live in our district, that work every day and serve our schools. So this would be all staff. Sounds like you mentioned students, make it accessible to the community, work with our communications team to make it as broadly accessible as possible across the community.
Absolutely. I think, me personally, I think in order for us to continue leading with making decisions that are best for our students, we have to include their voice at the table whenever possible. So yeah, I personally would love for students to be able to weigh in, especially our secondary students. I don't know too much about the opinions that kindergartners might have on the topic, but secondary at least, I think.
Yeah, I really like the idea of a thought exchange as well. I think community forum I could go either way on right now, just because there are a couple things in my head that I mentioned, earlier that are to me are showstoppers unless they're resolved. So I guess that would speak to the same thing as the thought exchange. I guess I'd personally rather get some of those issues resolved before either, but got to start somewhere. So anyway, I guess I could go either way, but thought exchange I think sounds like a good idea in the near term.
Can I ask if the thought exchanges usually have, representation from across the district pretty evenly, or? I mean, all the kids have technology now, so I would hope more people could access it, but.
Yeah, we've historically had really good success with thought exchange. One in that we work with their team, and they that's one of the things that they do in their support of us is to help us make sure there's outreach to diverse communities and to address language barriers. And I see Sandra nodding her head because she's really been starting to dig in with them about that. So Sandra, I'll let you jump in because you know more than I do about that partnership.
There's an option to have a different language other than English, and I would have to connect with them on how to do that, but we would really make sure to reach out to as many community partners as well for them to get the word out as well. Okay. So yeah, we can connect. Nikki and I can kind of give you an update of who we've reached out to. And
I really want to make sure that we hear from, if we're talking about equity of the, of, access to the stadium, I think but then we look at the vote that happened in 2018, like we really need to make sure that those voices are there again from Northeast, Northwest. So we have to be really intentional about hearing those voices.
How would the thought exchange qualify those giving their input? So if we're looking for specific input from parents, students, educators, people who live in Spokane, how are we going to make sure that there's nobody outside of that?
So,
one of the things you can do is that the beginning of the thought exchange, you can build in whichever demographic questions you would like to ask. So you can ask about your role. Are you a student? Are you a community member? Are you a parent? We can also ask demographic questions. What part of the city do you reside in? It's obviously, there's some fluidity to it because you're sending out the link and you're asking people to accurately represent themselves. But there is, I believe, an option where you can have people register through an email. So it just adds a little bit more accountability. And that's something we usually work with Thought Exchange on, of just kind of what's the best route to do it to get the most valid data and information back. But we can absolutely, and I think that was part of your question was, we can absolutely ask demographic questions so that we could then look at that data a couple of different ways.
Are we still on just agenda items? Is that where we still are? Because it's related, but I just want to ask, you know, the part about saving us the operating costs, if that's been analyzed by us.
It has. The data that they were presenting about the 350,000 is the operating costs we have been experiencing running LB the last few years.
Okay.
To Mark's point, in terms of upcoming information and agenda items, if the board does have questions, probably the most efficient is to route those to Mark and myself, and then we can get those compiled in a Friday delivery or your weekly update.
And also, were there any other comments or questions about our agenda planning calendar or who's attending? I know in our who's attending, we recently got an exit audit interview added for the 26th of March. If there's anybody else that wants to attend that, I'll be attending. So there's a slot for another board member to attend that as well.
Can you tell me what, so that's a yearly audit that happened? Or that will be happening?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, the audit is like wrapping up now, but that's the exit interview.
I have an appointment that day, so.
Oh, you're on mute, Director Weiser.
I'd like to attend one of the TNTP sessions. I was wondering if those have those been valuable? Like, are they, now that you've had a couple of those, good for board members to attend, do you think?
Yeah, well, President Haynes can speak to that better than I could because he attended the other day. So I'll let President Haynes speak to that. But they're very much planning timeline, talking about who's going to be in which groups. They're getting ready to engage us around K-3 literacy, around workforce diversity.
I personally think it's valuable, but I'm also fascinated with these kind of processes and stuff. So I know that you are also Director Weiser, but no, I found it to be valuable and get to hear directly from the team members that will be working on this project and really starting to build those relationships and develop a clear understanding of the, you know, their expectations, but also be able to input our expectations in the process. Also, it's been valuable so far.
I would think we're probably refined enough at this point in terms of kind of their thinking and what they're visioning. Our board members interested in TNTP coming for a work session, and they could kind of give you an overview of their plan. You could ask them questions and give them input. Would that be of interest?
That would be.
Okay.
I think it's a good idea.
Director Weiser, I was going to attend this Friday, but I can't go every Friday, but just wanted you to know.
It looks like the 19th is open, so I can, Joe, can you please put me down for that on the 19th?
Okay, perfect. Did anybody have any comments or questions about the agenda planning calendar?
So just so that we're 100% clear, yes to the thought exchange and yes to the forums. Do we hear that direction clearly?
I believe so. I know that Director Weiser had hesitation on the forum a little bit until there were more concrete solutions to a couple questions that he had. I think mainly concerning, so we're clear, the actual ownership of the stadium, right? And what was the other one? Director Weiser? The Civic Theater, yes. And I know, yeah, okay, yeah, got it.
It'd be more helpful to do the forums after we do the thought exchange and be able to give some feedback and results around that at the forums.
My only concern is timeline. With the bids scheduled to go out here in the next 3 weeks, and construction to start at the middle school and stadium to stay on time unless we change our direction, which helps the bids also on how do we structure those, just the length of time that it may take. That's my one wondering.
Well, and maybe it's a request that's too big of an ask, but I'm interested to understand. I know that what will happen if Albee is not done, because if we go downtown, it takes longer. So we'll do some more, teams will have to go to other stadiums. I get that. But what would happen if we did delay until we got more of these questions answered, or even including an August vote potentially? What would be the impact of that? That's just a question I have. Maybe that could be a Friday delivery, but it seems like we're coming to that very quickly, that we're going to.
The one thing that comes to my mind right away is that same delay cost that the West Coast Entertainment was willing to possibly cover, the $500,000 for a delay cost, because the bid would be structured different. We would bear that.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, if we didn't bear that, but if we just let the construction take longer, kids, teams would have to play elsewhere, right? Albee wouldn't be open at the same time frame, but my question is, couldn't students teams just play in, Meade Stadium and?
Yes, they could. It's just that if you would decide to stay at Albee next September, the delay cost of $550,000 would have occurred to start construction at Albee.
Yeah, I thought that was because we would then accelerate construction.
Correct. Accelerate plus some of the bidding work where they would bid on both the middle school project and the Albee Stadium. That opportunity wouldn't occur because we're going to start in the middle school no matter what. We got to get it done for the 2022-23 school year. Yeah.
So Director Weiser, we can capture that in a Friday delivery and provide that to the board, just so that Greg and Mark and their team, they can lay that out, so board members can really see that timeline.
Thank you.
And while we're all together, update, we just got notified by West Coast Entertainment that they are going to not be able to pull off the concert this summer because of most likely not being able to have 30,000 folks gather. That's the information, and they're not willing to take the $500,000 risk that couldn't occur. So they just notified us on Monday that they're not going to meet our Friday deadline to commit to that, just because of they're even having some of their artists pull out of even doing concerts at Northern Quest this summer. So they're disappointed, but it was a financial decision, as well as how many folks they think could gather next summer.
Unfortunate, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that direction. That's helpful as we plan the calendar out.
Thank you. Was there any discussion on the agenda planning calendar? Hearing and seeing none. Item 12, superintendent's report.
Yeah, just really quickly, elementary conferences are coming up. So staff are planning around those, and we're working to get those scheduled with families. It's going to be a really important check-in, kind of back to Director Weiser's comment earlier around the hybrid model and just calibrating around, the volume of work and just the feedback from families as staff will kind of work and calibrate that new model. So that's going to be a really important touch point for our elementary families. So we're excited about that. And spring break is right around the corner. So we're also getting ready for that. And we know that staff and kids are looking forward to that week reprieve. So those are the two things. All the other updates I had, that they've already been surfaced tonight, so it's good.
Can I ask a quick question about that? Do we usually not have a school board meeting during spring break?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
All right, well, with that being said, thank you to all the community members that tuned in and hung in there with us for the duration of those 2 meetings. But the meeting is now adjourned. I hope everyone has a great night, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Night.
Night, everyone.